Well, he used to have nothing but the utmost flattery.
Yeah, until I was mean to him.
And Lyle, listen, I think you're brilliant. I have the utmost respect for Lyle.
I think Lyle probably smarter than me.
Now Mike can't even hear my name without losing his mind.
Lyle, listen. Lyle, we need your help. Lyle McDonald, we need your help. Hey, Lyle McDonald, f*** you.
I'd be like, you Lyle McDonald? Well, that depends.
Debating Lyle McDonald, like if he was in front of me, it would take the world for me to not choke him to death.
So I always move out of arm's length.
I'm not getting stronger week to week. Am I training wrong? If you're getting stronger week to week, you're undertraining.
Because we actually have the genetics to grow muscle, unlike him. And that is meant as an insult because I don't like Lyle.
My methods work, Mike, and you proved by your own logic that yours don't.
The only reason I compete is to illustrate to people that the methods that we espouse at Renaissance Periodization are effective.
It worked for you. If by work you mean abject failure at the only sport you ever tried to be good at.
You started this, Lyle. You made fun of me first. I have more willpower than you. I'm just better than you, Lyle.
I know one of, well, his ex-coach. Some of the questions that Mike, world's bodybuilding expert, has asked him, and he doesn't know shit.
And also in every category of human behavior, I'm tougher than you. I can train closer to failure than you. I can do it for longer. I'm funnier than you. I'm smarter than you. And I'm better at being a than you.
Dr. Mike Israetel is a competitive bodybuilder and highly successful YouTuber who's known for making critiques of other people's fitness advice on the Renaissance Periodisation channel. Mike criticizes the way people train, the way people eat, and even the way people take performance-enhancing substances, from fitness influencers to Hollywood celebrities and even professional bodybuilders. But what about Mike's own advice and practices in competitive bodybuilding? Can they be criticized? Well, if you were to ask Mike, then the answer would most likely be no, because Mike only accepts criticism from top experts in his field.
I don't know why I fucked up. And if you think you know, you are presuming you know more than me about the thing I'm one of the top experts in the world in, and also the thing I'm literally involved in myself. So whatever ideas you have about how I can improve, just fuck right off.
By his own admission, Mike can't figure out why he effed up in competitive bodybuilding. It truly is an enigma. We need a top expert on the case. They aren't easy to find, but folks, I have just the right man. Lyle McDonald, welcome
Howdy.
back. Hey,
Thank
you for joining me.
Hi.
And thanks for constantly giving me shout-outs on your YouTube channel, by the way.
My buddy Solomon Nelson, who does some fantastic videos. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's more people need to know about. You're doing the stuff that I used to do or wanted to do and never got around to. So I want more people to see more fact and evidence-based examinations of the nonsense that goes on in this industry, because there's a lot of it.
Mike and Lyle go way back. Tell me about that volume debate.
Mike just talked in circles.
Absolutely give qualification.
It was 90 minutes of wasted time. Truly wasted time.
In fact, Mike used to hold Lyle in high regard.
I have the utmost respect for Lyle.
I think Lyle probably smarter than me and knows a lot of shit.
Now Mike can't even hear my name without losing his mind. Why? Go listen to everything I said. I said, I don't care how he trains. Perfectly fine with how he trains. His information is shit, and he's telling you what he's telling you is wrong. And apparently 5-6 years later, it still bothers him.
The details of that will come later in Chapter 3. For now, I'll outline the structure of this video. In Chapter 2, Lyle and I critically analyse Mike's fitness advice. In Chapter 3, we critically analyse Mike's rebuttal to one of Lyle's past criticisms of Mike, which is that what Mike claims is muscular failure actually isn't. In Chapter 4, we critically analyse Mike's competitive bodybuilding career, such as it has been. I conclude in Chapter 5 by discussing what you can take away from this whole exposé. The first thing I asked Lyle to do was critique Mike Israetel's fitness advice in a similar vein to the way Mike criticizes everyone else's advice. We went through several of Mike's claims. Here's what Lyle had to say about them. He says that to have a very low body fat percentage, even to the point where you have striated glutes, isn't unhealthy.
Low body fat's not being healthy. It just is resting on I'm sorry, forgive me. It's resting on an empty assumption. People see striated glutes and they go, that can't be healthy. And I would love to be in real life with that person instead of over social media and say, okay, no, I hear you. Why not? But can you explain to me why it's not healthy? And usually they can't.
Okay. That is, well.
He does make an exception for women in the form of the estrogen goes down, they lose bone mineral density.
It actually leads to long-term bone loss. So fat goes out the window. Being lean for females, very lean, is definitely not a good thing.
But yeah, he says striated glutes aren't inherently unhealthy.
What does he think happens to men's hormones at that level?
He goes, testosterone goes down, but, that doesn't mean you're less healthy.
Certain biomarkers like testosterone, estrogen, generally the sex hormones, they definitely take a hit when you're very, very lean. Slight downside. Okay.
Testosterone goes to castrate levels at that level, and I dare say the data on hypogonadism and health is pretty well established. So, yeah. Now, I'm actually going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. Not in what he said, but in that a defense could be made in his case. Because something that has fascinated me for years, we knew about all these adaptations to dieting. Metabolic rate, thyroid, nervous system, appetite, muscle loss, all this stuff. We knew it all happened. You looked at what happened to hormones, testosterone goes castrate, T3 levels go down, cortisol goes up, estrogen and progesterone go down, the whole hormonal profile, muscle growth, blah, 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 protein synthesis goes down, all these things happen, appetite goes up. But if you go back and look at the way drug-using bodybuilders, what they sort of, through trial and error, figured out to do for contest prep, they were replacing or fixing every one of those systems. Testosterone goes down, take anabolic steroids. T3 drops, take thyroid medication. Sympathetic nervous system goes down, clenbuterol. Growth hormone screws up, growth hormone. Appetite suppressants. Now you've got the GLP-1 drugs. Going to put me out of a job. Whether they knew it or not, they were fixing each of these problems that occurred. Now, leptin would fix it all, but it never got out of the research stage, right? Other than for one disease condition. But leptin injections would have fixed all this at the central level because the body would still think that you were fat and eating. But neither here nor there. If you look at a natural bodybuilder in contest shape, their system is completely flat.
Yeah.
There's a famous study on, it's got a turgid title, hormonal and endocrine responses to a high stress. Basically, it was a bunch of special forces guys that were forced to live on no calories, 16 hours of exercise, of pack work, and very little sleep. They all ended up at like 5% body fat. Testosterone was castrate, cortisol was up, T3 was down, IGF-1 was down. All this, basically, that's a natural bodybuilder in contest shape.
Yeah.
Because contest dieting is simply controlled starvation. We're getting to as close to death as you can without actually dying.
One thing Mike says, it's not the leanness as such that is unhealthy, but rather the dieting process.
In large part, yes, they're not in great health right there, but it's because of the diet fatigue, not the leanness itself.
God almighty, how many hours do we have? There is both truth and falsehood to that. But it doesn't ultimately matter. Even at calorie balance, at 5% body fat, your hormones are still flat. Period.
Mm.
Now, if you were to look at a drug-using bodybuilder at 4% body fat, you'll be physiologically normal in a hormonal sense. That's why they'll be perfectly fine. They absolutely can't stay that lean. year round because they're replacing everything with a needle or a pill. So again, I'm giving him a benefit of the doubt that he doesn't deserve because he would never qualify it in this sense.
He didn't actually mention the natty or not question,
Of course
which
he
I thought
did.
was hilarious.
That,
So
but
he's
that's what,
telling natural lifters in the general population that to have striated glutes isn't unhealthy.
sure. Sure.
Yeah, your testosterone takes a hit, but big whoop, you
But
get
it's
all of
not a
these
matter of taking
improvements
a hit. It
elsewhere.
is at castrate levels. It is at like zero, right? It is not a matter of it taking a hit. It is not that it's down a little bit. It is hypogonadal, and we know the health consequences of that, and they are not good.
He only knows some modicum of leanness because of his drug stack, which we'll get to later.
Yes. So yeah,
Well,
that's
that's
I mean,
ad hominem, but I just wanted to throw in that bub. I'm not
no,
saying
but
that
it,
itself undermines his argument. It's just a
no,
funny thing to note.
but literally, I mean, like every piece of science says that's wrong. We know factually, even male immune system is optimized between 12 and 15%. Low energy availability, red S, all that data on both women and men, right? You go look at extremely like horse jockeys of all things are one of the male athletes that see all the same problems as female athletes because they do all the same crazy stuff. All that low energy availability data, there's decades of this. Most of it has been on women, but the data on men is now emerging and it's showing the exact same stuff. It happens at a later level compared to women in terms of energy availability, and I want to get into that. But like men's bodies are proportionally more robust in the sense that they don't see the problems as soon, but at that level, you absolutely do.
Mm.
So that's just asinine, and it's, I dare say, a little bit disingenuous isn't the word I'm looking for.
Irresponsible?
Yeah, yeah. Criminal would be a little bit too strong, but yeah, it's irresponsible to tell people that because it's wrong.
Yeah. I
mean,
thank you.
It's right up there with during the metabolic damage thing. Apparently, Lane Norton said that it wasn't his responsibility to tell women they shouldn't stay super lean all the time because he's a libertarian and he's not. Fuck you. It is desperately unhealthy, and we know this. But whatever. It's yes, I think that's irresponsible to tell people that.
About some other irresponsible advice. Take a month off to see massive gains. Growth hack.
The growth hack is to take a month off of training once a year, every year, to grow more. That's a fresh, very resensitized muscle, sensitive to muscle growth, sensitive to training, because it hasn't experienced it in a while.
Resensitization.
Oh, Jesus. The whole resensitization thing is hilarious. I mean, it's been around for a while. And, they've done the occasional paper. There's a weird paper where they had people take train. It was beginners, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 3 weeks on, and they ended up at the exact same place. But these were neural strength gains, and it was water shifts anyway. And there was another one, they had to take a week off. And you see these. There's a paper that got a lot of press last year. And they were looking at molecular markers. And it caused these molecular markers to improve for growth, but the paper itself said, well, it might be resensitization or it's probably just detraining. And this really argues for consistency in training, right? So way back, so we go way back, let's go way back. The old T-Nation days. You ever heard about the ABCDE diet? This anabolic burst cycling diet and exercise program. And there was this idea at one point that by deliberately causing muscle loss, by eating low protein and overtraining, would cause all these adaptations. They were basing this on people like underweight kids and malnutrition and rapid catch-up growth that occurs, like when you fix protein energy malnutrition, like kwashiorkor and marasmus and stuff, that you would get this big rebound growth because you see this decrease in protein breakdown and blah, blah, blah. And and that's true. And you get rapid growth right until you regain what you lost. And then you're right back to where you started, right? This is like the guys that just swear up and down that post-competition, there is an anabolic rebound where you are primed to gain muscle mass, despite the fact that every system in your physiology is geared towards fat regain. Eric Trexler did a paper on that. The first few days, there's a huge increase in lean body mass. It's glycogen and water.
Mm.
And then over the next 6 weeks, 97% fat gain. Like every system in the body, the idea that you're primed to grow at the end of a contest diet. Because people, you get this big jack, so you take a month off and you shrink. Yeah, I bet you do get accelerated growth. It's called muscle memory. And you get right back to where you were, at which point, and if you'd spent that month training, you'd be further than you are now. It doesn't work that way.
Great response.
And the science doesn't support.
He said that you'll generate more growth training 6 days a week compared to fewer days of training per week. So 6 outperforms 4, and he said that without qualification in a YouTube short.
6 times a week training allows you to train your body harder and signal more muscle growth than training 4 or 5 times a week. You would get better gains if you train 6 days a week.
Of course he did. There's no, I know you've done videos on this, and I've talked about it too. There is no nuance to the discussion. I mean, some of the things that I'm saying now, because I'm not going to spend hours doing a full treatise, right, to discuss any of these concepts, frequency, intensity, proximity to failure, volumes, you cannot discuss them in isolation. How many sets you can or should do per workout or per week will depend on your proximity to 0 reps or reserve. Saying 6 days a week is better than 4. Well, under what conditions, given what parameters? Also, and again, this is a point I know you've brought up, is who are we talking to? What population here was another good one. You might have missed this. One of Mike's brilliant rebuttals to me, another one of his videos about how he was recommending submaximal. Goes, my videos are aimed at those college kids that train too hard, or something roughly to that effect.
From my experience, the kind of demographic that we're talking about, a lot of college students and folks out of, in high school and just out of high school, they're the guys that are getting stapled with everything. They're the guys round back pulling to failure all the time. There's tons and tons of people that I've run into the gym. The kind of young male audience that goes on YouTube are the kind of people that want to bleed out of their eyeballs in training, and they do it all the time. I don't think that those folks benefit very much from going harder.
Dude, I've been in gyms for 30 years. You know how many people I've seen training too hard? That is a population of people that don't exist. The only exceptions being 15-year-old kids bench pressing with their buddies. That's it, right? If I'm in the gym on any given day and see 1 or 2 people even getting within 3 reps of limits, that's a lot. Most people, it's at most half maximal reps, if that.
Yeah.
But that, again, that was, well, my video, okay, then why are you not qualifying that in every video? You are saying this is how you should train, not if you're going to grinding failure all the time, you need to back it off. Again, it's endless, made up, ad hoc, on the fly bullshit to avoid addressing the actual facts. And that is what he's best at. Realize this is the man that said sleep is better than steroids. So
of all of the drugs you could take for muscle building, sleep is the best drug, so to speak. An hour of extra sleep that brings you from sleeping 2 hours less than you need to 1 less than you need is unreal powerful and comparable to tons of anabolic drugs.
How anyone can take this guy seriously is beyond me.
Yeah.
How anyone can listen to that. And I did. So I made a post about that on Facebook. And there was one guy, well, if you haven't slept for 4 days straight, oh my God.
If that's what it takes, then,
If that's, but these are the kind of defenses, the kind of counter arguments people have to come up with. This one, that's not what he's saying. So stop trying to be an apologist. Stop trying to give this guy the benefit of the doubt when he's spouting pure bollocks, right?
Yeah, at a certain point, there's only so charitable you can be.
Sure. Also, and someone else, a buddy of mine who I think you correspond with, Joseph, Ronnie Coleman made a point that he only slept 4 hours a night.
I sleep at very weird hours, and I really don't sleep a lot.
Basically, to take that at face value, all right, if we have 2 people, and I think you made this point, that are both sleeping 4 hours a week, give one guy 600 milligrams of testosterone and get the other guy 8 hours of sleep, Mike is saying this guy will grow better. Bold-faced lie. I mean, it's just flat out. I do wonder, I did an Instagram thing about this. And I was like, when you wake up every morning and ask what lie you'll tell.
Yeah.
But this is also, you see this a lot in steroid users. They try to downplay the role of the drugs.
And that's a point I made.
For years, Mike would never actually, my special sports supplements. You lying shit.
Did you hear him talking about how drugs aren't a shortcut since the mechanism by which they work is letting you work harder? He said that in a podcast he did.
It's not a shortcut because performance-enhancing drugs allow you to do more work. They allow you to recover faster, better. You do more work. It's not a shortcut. It's the opposite of a shortcut. You're doing more.
So when people say, oh, that guy's taking a shortcut by taking steroids, like if the shortcut means he has to eat 6 times a day, sleep 9 hours a night, take 10 other drugs to counteract the effects of steroids that are negative, take 5 other drugs to boost the effects of steroids in a synergistic way, walk around like a zombie all the time, fight his own mentality day in and day out, and train like a monster. Not exactly a shortcut. It is a long cut. So,
and yet he doesn't work hard. What? I mean, in other sports, maybe not. They allow you to train more intensely because other sports require you to train intensely, and the way he trains is not.
That's right. I
mean, I guess he was a power lifter at one point. And I mean, Joseph point early, you can go find, he's got results in open powerlifting. They were decent from what I can tell, because he is. I mean, he's built like a troll. He's got far more better biomechanics for that than he ever did for bodybuilding. But, you know, and why doesn't he go back to that? Well, in powerlifting training, you actually have to train hard. And in bodybuilding, I'm sorry. I mean, crutch is a loaded word, but it doesn't. You can take drugs without training at all and grow. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It may, I mean, okay. I don't, it does, that doesn't, no, I don't. Again, you see this with drug users. They want to downplay the role of the drugs. Oh, it's because I work hard. It's not the drugs. Okay, then why do you bench 500 on and 365 off? If it's not why not just, Paul Carter once said, a true genius among men, once said, and I quote, the reason naturals aren't as big as pros because they don't train hard and they follow if it fits your macros. Kid you not. That's what he said. Because we know natural bodybuilders don't train hard. Sure. Natural bodybuilders don't eat clean. So I asked him, hey, Paul, if that's true, why do you take steroids? Why don't you just train harder and eat clean? At which point he made a slur about my mother and then probably blocked me. Because, okay. Yeah, that's why naturals aren't as big as the pros, because they don't train hard enough. Well, then why do the pros take drugs at all? If it's not the drug, but that's real common. You see that among drug users, really wanting to downplay what the role. I mean, I'm not saying, and of course that leads to the other thing, the whole, you know, the drugs are a crutch thing gets used, like Ben Johnson when he got disqualified. It's like, he was a cheat and he just couldn't do it clean. It's like, no, he was already great before he started using. He had to train his absolute balls off. And yes, Charlie Francis did admit it allowed you to train harder more frequently because your recovery was better. It allowed it. But it still wasn't a crutch because he still had to put in the work. And bodybuilding is unique in that you don't. And again, the science proves that. I mean, and that was for years, nobody believed it. They were just like, drugs don't help that much. And then Basin did his study and it's like, yeah, I got bad news, guys. Yeah, they do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one great example of how much drugs have helped Mike's physique is take a look at his neck. He's admitted that he doesn't train his neck.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Your boy here, I got a pretty fucking big neck. And I've never trained neck in my life, and I don't plan on it. Now, I grapple too, so that's plenty of neck training. But my neck would be like maybe half an inch smaller if I didn't grapple. I never fucking trained my neck.
Maybe it gets a bit of training when he does BJJ, but no direct training. And yet it grew plenty from when he was natural to now.
Yeah, and that's,
he didn't do any training for his neck.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to because the traps and delts blow up. I've told this story in my group years ago in Salt Lake City. I was training some female trainee of mine, and she was using, 40 pounds per hand dumbbell, semi-strict lateral raises. She had decent shoulders. There's a girl across the gym that was training. Her and her boyfriend were obviously juiced.
Yeah.
15 pounds each hand, fucking about, capped, just cannonball delts. Drugs, absolutely. Like I said, in other sports, yeah, you still have to put in the work, and the drugs may allow you to train harder, but I mean, he can't have it both ways. He can't say, well, it's not a crutch because it allows you to train harder, but natural should be training harder without drugs. And what the fuck? Like,
oh yeah, there's no consistency. My favorite, you should probably train more than the pro bodybuilders you follow.
Oh, you should probably train more than the pro bodybuilders you follow.
Yes, you did that video on that. And I mean, that is baffling to me.
I can't believe it.
The only way, again, to give him the benefit of the doubt, would if he was saying that, oh, pros just let the drugs do the work, that would probably be more honest and close to accurate than just the statement, the assertion. Did he ever give a reason for that assertion? I mean, I watched your video, but I don't remember.
Yes, he does. So his basic argument is smaller natural individuals need to do more volume because per set, when you're bigger, each set is more disruptive, basically. You're moving heavier loads. It's going to take more time to recover. So whereas a very enormous juiced up IFBB pro bodybuilder might not be able to recover from more than 8 hard sets once per week, you as a natural would be able to recover from more than 8 sets just once per week. And so you would be leaving gains on the table if you didn't do more sets more often than most IFBB pro bodybuilders.
But one of my unpopular opinions will, of course, turn out, which of course is right, even if nobody accepts it yet, is that as you get more advanced, you need less volume, not more. And this is, again, I'm giving Mike far more of the benefit of the doubt than he deserves. Because if I can explain his argument better than he can, or I can make him at least a fake plausible, as people do get bigger and stronger, yes, every set, will be significantly more of a stress to the body, right? Ray Williams, who's squatting 1,000 pounds, he is not squatting high volumes. He's sure as fuck not squatting high frequency. Because for him, 80% is still 800 pounds on his back, right? This whole idea that I think Mike does sort of adhere to, that you should do more volume as you get more advanced, that came out of drug-fueled Russian training. They ramp their volumes as they ramp their drugs, just like Mike does. But if you're talking about a natural, yeah, as you get to a more advanced level, you need less volume, not more. But at that point, you're also talking about specialization cycles. That's a whole separate thing.
He's also said advanced lifters need more volume, and that contradicts whatever argument, whatever charitable interpretation of train more than the pros there might be.
For advanced, the bottom end is higher, 3 sets minimum in most cases, and up to as many as 12 sets per session is a really good target for hypertrophy. Intermediates can grow on volumes which for the advanced, in some cases, cause, well, either really shitty gains or only stagnation. As your body gets used to training, its work capacity improves. And that means that if the work capacity is in order and is higher, and if your recovery ability still hasn't been maximized, doing more volume, that's right, more sets, which the HIIT folks didn't like at all, is actually a great way to continue to challenge the muscles.
But then Mike is saying you should do tons more volume when you're dieting in a deficit and your recovery's down. There is no consistency to anything that's being said. There is never any qualification when this stuff is talked about. It's just do this. High volume is good. High frequency is good. Low, whatever it is. Good, bad, like there is no nuance. There is no qualification of who we are talking about. A 22-year-old obsessed male, competition physique athlete, a 45-year-old with a life. This is never discussed.
Yeah, never.
There's no consistency or logic to this. He says whatever he feels like saying and thinks is true today, and will say something completely different tomorrow, and then say the third thing the next time. There is no consistency to any of it. So, like I said, it's like arguing with fog.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Does volume beat progressive tension overload? I believe that's one of Mike's older claims.
No.
So if we're really serious about saying it's tension, it's progressive intention, progress and tension that we're really going after, are we really prepared to defend that with data and experimentation and even just a mental thought experiment? And the answer is really, when it comes down to it, no, we're not. Volume is the boss and intensity is the assistant. The boss is useless without the assistant, but the boss is more important. So
I've been thumping the drum of progressive tension overload over time for my entire, we've known since the 70s. That is the stimulus for growth. Even the papers you read go, tension is the initiator of growth. And then they blather about volume, right? Every paper that supposedly shows that volume is the primary driver of hypertrophy all have progressive tension overload built into the study design, with like 4 exceptions. We added weight to maintain the proper intensity. Everything else is being studied on a base of progressive tension overload. Ergo, that is primary. Right? Because you can prove this to yourself, that in the long term, progressive tension overload is the key. Long term. Go find any dude in your gym who's not on Mike's special sports supplements. See what he's benching. Let's say it's 90 kilos for 10, 185 pounds in non-commie units. Come back a year later. If he's still only benching 185 by 10, I do not give a how many sets he's doing. He will be no bigger. Period. Come back and he's now up at 245, 115-ish kilos. He will be bigger.
Yep.
But simple fact is that if you look at, there are no big natural bodybuilders who are not strong, or who, more importantly, have not gotten much stronger, right? Because this is all that matters. You should just be able to do one maximal isometric and grow. I go, well, no, that's not. Well, they were saying that would be sufficient. I go, but it's not. I go, we know that there is some number of high tension contractions required to turn on the growth mechanisms. We don't know how many it is yet, but we know that there is some number that is going to be required. But yeah, so in the long term, and people go, but well. And I've had people I've said that they're like, well, but I only squat, 365 by 8. I go, look, I'm not saying you're elite powerlifter strong. I go, but you cannot go from squatting 135 by 8 to squatting 365 by 8 pounds and not have bigger legs or be bigger. It's a bad example because backs, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Show me someone who's never squatted more than 85 by 8. They will not get bigger. It is a matter of getting stronger relative to yourself in the same exercise, done in the same like there's a zillion qualifiers. I wrote like a 5-part series about tension on my website. But I'm like, I hate that I have to make all these qualifiers, but you people are determined to misunderstand it. It would take, but it's too long for me to write this paragraph. This is what I'm saying, but it is assuming that your form is not changing as you add weight. And if I take someone who's using too much weight on rows and I reduce the weight and let them use proper form, their back is now getting a stimulus. Well, see, lighter weight was growth. Like, no, but we're not talking about an exercise. We're talking about the muscle. And God Almighty, are you going there? It's like, it's aggressive illiteracy sometimes. But in the long term, and there's a reason a lot of good natural bodybuilders cross-compete in powerlifting. There's a lesson to be had there. There are no big, weak natural bodybuilders, period. You cannot find, even the pros, ignoring Mike, and there are guys that get away with, lighter, pumpier training and let the drugs do the work. Most of those guys are pretty damn strong. Dorian was a monster, right? Coleman was a monster who got injured because he talked about ego lifting. Going back to your previous video, like most of those guys, like you watch those, the guys that succeed, they get pretty strong. Now, are they pushing the weights relentlessly like someone who's natural? No, because connective tissue and injuries, and you don't have to. So at that level, again, that workout is an overload for quite some time at the advanced level. And when Mike's like, want to train like me? Get my app. No, people should not train like you, because without your drugs, it will get them nowhere. And too many people have learned that the hard way. I mean, even I see the ads for the RP app, and they use part what their athletes. They're like, oh, train like this guy, this RP athlete with our app. And I'll put it in the comments every time. I go, don't even pretend this guy got this big from the app. You are lying to people. But this entire industry is based on that, and always has been and always will be. But yeah, he just tells bold-faced lies. Mike was like, well, if you don't get sore or a pump, you need to do more volume.
If you get no pump at all from your training, man, the app's probably going to tell you to do more sets because this is not enough. The app is going to ask you, hey, how sore did you get? And it uses that data to inform how much volume it gives you for that session it's asking about next time.
Neither of those things being a relevant metric for growth. And if you put that into the app, you ended up doing.
Tell me more about your thoughts on this notion of using pump and soreness as a gauge for whether or not you should ramp up your volume throughout a mesocycle, if you like, which is
physiological
what
standpoint.
Wants you to
physiological standpoint, the pump has nothing to do with anything, as far as I'm concerned. At best, it tells you that you're actually working a muscle, but as far as actual physiological stimulus, it has nothing to do with anything, right? If all you do is nothing but heavy sets of fives, we know that'll get a growth stimulus. You're never going to get a pump.
Yeah.
The pump has nothing to do with it. As far as soreness, because I did a piece on this a bunch of years ago, I said basically, I'm like, stop chasing DOMs, right? Delayed onset muscle soreness. Because, and I made a number of points. And I would make new points now because there's even more research now about that, which is there's the question of, what DOMS actually is. Because there's this weird research group, right? Because here's how you test to see if muscle damage has occurred. You do something, downhill running, eccentric training, whatever it is, and you take a muscle biopsy, right? Little set of scissors, you take a chunk out of the muscle and you analyze it. Well, this research group asked, what happens if you take a biopsy of an untrained muscle? And they did that, and they found that there was a great deal of muscle damage because when you cut a chunk of muscle out, it causes disruption of the muscle. At least to some degree, some of the muscular damage that was being seen was due to the method of biopsy. Okay, so that's number one. Even beyond that, okay, in a practical sense, most people find that they get the most sore early on in a training cycle and grow worse and get less sore as the cycle progresses and grow better. Damas has shown fairly incontrovertibly that in the earliest stages of a new exercise, the first 3 weeks, even though muscle protein synthesis goes up, muscle damage goes up, and you don't get any growth. It's not till after muscle damage goes down that you start getting the growth. Well, if you're going to argue that soreness is due to damage, if anything, DOMS is inversely related to growth. And there are people you can get there. I mean, also Damas's point, he's got a whole paper on why muscle damage is not part of this. Concentric only training generates growth. It doesn't cause damage. It doesn't cause DOMS. Other work has suggested that what we think of as is connective tissue damage. Got a good review paper on that. Another one thinks it's actual pinching of the nerves due to local inflammation. DOMS does not necessarily have anything to do with actual muscle fibers, and it's got jack shit to do with growth. So using DOMS as a metric for when to increase volume is, and I wrote that, and Mike apparently didn't handle it well. He wrote this angry piece about, well, here's a list of 20 things that correlate with soreness and growth. Not Lyle's best piece. Yeah, but I'm right. And you can now go find, I think he did a debate with little Milo about, is muscle soreness a stimulant like, and I'm sure he's saying that something different now. But that was what the app did, is if you didn't get sore, you weren't doing enough sets. And that's got nothing to do with it. You shouldn't chase. I mean, also, there's just the simple fact. People that train a muscle once a week tend to get more sore. The people that train a muscle more frequently and people that train a muscle more frequently tend to grow better. If anything, DOMS is actually is the opposite of growth.
Oh yeah, if you want the sorest quads you'll ever have, go run a marathon. Is that going to generate much growth compared to doing a quads workout with barbell back squats and leg extensions? No.
Soreness has nothing. The because again, it's based on this old idea of growth is stimulated by breaking muscle down and it growing. So you need to get sore, which is indicative of muscle damage, and that's not how muscle grows. It's not. It's never been an issue of breaking it down and building it back up. It's a matter of continuous gene expression via mechanotransduction and mTOR and FAK and all that deep molecular stuff. For the same reason that supercompensation, as it's typically described, is not a thing. That's not how adaptation occurs. So yeah, so soreness and the pump are relevant metrics.
And it's Mike Israetel who's arguing that in an aggressive caloric deficit, you should do very high volume, high frequency, high rep lifting. You should train 5 to 6 days a week with very high volumes, sets of 10 to 30, short rest intervals to get the most anabolism, catabolism throughput in the muscle, right? Doing a protein sparing modified fast. That's how you should train according to him.
Today's topic is how to transform your physique fast, 5 to 6 days per week of weights. Because you want to present that best physique, you got to put as much throughput into the muscles, catabolism and anabolism as possible. You train twice a week, you look fine. You train 5 to 6 days a week for, 6 weeks, you're going to look pretty cool at the end. High volume, generally, you're pushing the limits because you want the most throughput possible. High volume training not only builds the most muscle, it breaks down the most muscle and requires the most calories to repair. So if you do relatively high volume training, then your total amount of body change is very high, both on the fat burning end and the muscle building end. We want to maximize that.
A lot of this, and this is what it's always colored by, this idea that you should train more on aggressive deficits. This all comes out of drug-fueled bodybuilding. It always has. You go back to the 70s, where supposedly guys like Arnold and their ilk, they claim that they didn't bring the anabolics until contest prep. Now, is that true? We will never know. I've heard both sides of it argued. I don't know who to believe. We'll never know for sure. That's what they claimed. And what you would see is that they would ramp their volume up going into the contest. Now, they also talked about gaining weight as they leaned out. That alone tells you that something weird was going on, right? They did these very short 12-week diet cycles. Number one, because they had drugs. Number two, they didn't have to be nearly as lean as they need to now. That's a whole separate thing. But you would see, also, they didn't do a lot. They were using this high volume, high rep, short rest period weight training essentially as cardio, because they didn't do a lot of cardio in that era, by and large. So they were ramping their volume up along with it. And, and there was this idea, high reps to etch in the cuts and burn in the separation. Or maybe it was burn in the cuts and etch in the separations. High rep leg extensions to get cut lean and like that. And I'm like, well, okay, but they were using high volume weight training as a calorie burn, but they had steroids to stave off muscle loss, because when naturals do that, they hemorrhage muscle.
Well, Mike is actually advocating for the lifting to be a kind of calorie burner.
And sets of 5 just don't burn as many calories. And here we're trying to burn so many calories that your weight training workouts, as illustrated by the short rest intervals being okay, they double as caloric burn workouts. So sets of 10 to 30 reps will be brutal, especially if you do it in superset style. But boy, oh boy, will that burn a whole lot of calories for you.
It's free burnt calories, so you may as well do high rep, high volume, short rest interval
or
training.
You could just walk on the treadmill and not cut into your recovery all the time.
Yeah.
Or you could just do that.
Yeah.
Rather than burning yourself out in the weight room, which is what everybody does. But when naturals do that and shift from heavy training and they remove the tension component, all they do is lose muscle mass without fail. I know, because I knew the ones that did it back in the day. And they followed the advice of the pros. Lighter weights, higher reps, short rest intervals during contest prep, and they got smaller. And you burn out.
Yeah.
And you overtrain. Because what have I been saying for going on 25 years now? In a diet, you need to do less volume. And even outside of that, even among the evidence-based professionals, they're still saying, oh, well, what builds muscle maintains it. Oh, bullshit. We've got decades of work on maintenance training, and that's just not true. This idea that you need to maintain your training volume all the way through diet prep to maintain muscle mass is nonsense.
It's like a sound bite that just sounds good, but that has very little evidence supporting
it. And it sounds physiological. Well, what builds muscle maintains it, except we know that's not how maintenance works. The calorie burn from lifting weights is jack and shit. Not that cardio is much more, but it doesn't cut into your recovery. But again, when you've got drugs to let you overtrain and burn out, I guess you can do that. I mean, but again, nuance. For drug use, maybe. I mean, whatever. I mean, it still didn't get Mike in shape, so maybe not. Whereas, the guy I just helped get his pro card, I had him doing low volume, full body every 2 or 3 days, and he didn't lose an ounce of muscle and came in absolutely shrink wrapped. So, because it's just not, that energy is better put somewhere else.
Yeah.
The idea of training, again, lifting more in contest prep, that comes out of drug-fueled bodybuilding.
Yeah.
When naturals do it, they always burn out. Always. And they end up wrecked by the time they get there, assuming they make it to stage at all.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really, that pushback against that horrible advice is needed.
I mean, seriously, if he just said, look, this works when you're on drugs and don't want to do cardio, I would take no issue with that statement. I still would do it that way if I were coach, but I don't work with people on props. The rules are different, and that's perfectly fine. At that point, screw cardio. Just take DNP if you've got the balls. Like, just if you're going to do it for real, right? Just screw cardio. If you can just take DNP and be done with it. But the rules change when you've got that fixing the problems. I deal with naturals, and that stuff doesn't work, as has been proven for decades. Now, people will always, but the guys who win do it. Survivorship bias.
Yeah.
I don't care about the 6 who made it to stage. I care about the 99.9% that ended up injured, broken with an eating disorder.
Like, higher volumes let you grow more. I think that's another just blanket assertion that he's made.
High volume training not only builds the most muscle, it breaks down the most muscle and requires the most calories to repair.
Like, there are 52 set per week programs, 45 set per week programs, 27 set per week programs, 18 set per week programs that all outperform the smaller set per week programs that were compared in those studies directly.
More volume equals more growth. Okay, cool story, bro. Return on investment, U-shaped curve, it's just more volume equals more growth without any. Okay, cool. I'm still. Oh, the other thing this paper talked about when they talked about the super high volumes, they also mentioned, this will get left out. One thing we did not address was, the long-term sustainability and burnout issue. They also brought up the fact that in most of these super high volume studies, they're looking at like 1 or 2 muscle groups, right? That is still the question I'm waiting to have answered about this 52 set study. It was quads only. Hamstrings were like 4 sets, and upper body was just, they gave a little something to do on the side. Okay. Assuming 52 sets per week. Oh, also that 52 sets is only for 2 weeks. That's not how any of this was presented. They didn't do 52 sets for 20 weeks. They built up to it. That was 2 maximum volume weeks. And the growth was still insignificantly better for the 2.5 times. But I asked the question, and I still ask the question. Let's assume 50 sets per week gives better growth based on this study in quads only. How do you do that for full body? It's just that simple, right? Chest, back, delts, biceps, triceps, quads, hamstrings, glutes, 8 or 9 muscle groups, depending on how you want to count it. Are you going to do 450 hard sets a week? No, because it cannot physically be done. Even in this study, they barely, they even talked about the highest volume group was really tired at the end of 2 weeks. That was 2 weeks of this. I did a video a while back. Sustainable training, right? Even if, and this was Mike's thing. Oh, and back to the volume debate. That was another one of Mike's arguments about using super high volumes. Well, maybe if you use really high volumes early in your career, Maybe you can eke out a little bit more growth above your genetic limit.
If you get somewhere faster, you have gotten to a point in which you are still more youthful, less injury prone, and more likely to put on more gains. If someone reaches the tip of their spear at age 40, geez, you're 40. It's, like there's only so much you can gain after that. But if someone reaches the tip of their spear abilities by the time they're 30, they're still young, and they still have a potential to take that even further. So I think there's an absolute difference there as well.
That's not what a genetic limit is, knuckle. Okay? Doesn't matter how you get there, you end up at the same point. Even if you get, and because somebody asked me that question, it's Q&A. You're like, will you gain faster or reach a higher level than you would by using moderate volumes for long periods? So they go, no, because a genetic limit is a genetic limit is a genetic limit. You're going to get to where you're going to get. Maybe, because Mike is like, well, maybe if you get closer in 3 years versus, because he was like, well, rather than taking 7 years to reach your genetic limit, you get there in 5. It only takes 3 to 4 if you're doing it right. The 7 was just a thrown out number that is completely illegitimate. But the guy asked me, it's like, once you get, I go, yeah, you'll get to the same point and you won't burn out, you won't get injured, right? Because even if these short-term studies are showing what they're purported to show, which they're usually not, what do you do for the rest of the year? Because as I like to jokingly say, and this is anecdote, so I know I'm the science guy, but my experience being hurt is not good for gains. And when people do this shit, they get hurt. All the people that jumped on the high frequency thing ended up with tendon, with joint problems. All the people who did the MRV stuff ended up overtrained and injured. Rather than trying to get 5% every 8 weeks by doing triple the volume, and then being injured for 3 months, you're better off getting 3% over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because the increase in gains by doubling your volume is never double. The return on investment is microscopic. Assuming most people get it anyway. So like I said, you cannot do high volumes for all body parts. It can't be done. Even if you look at, like, go back to Brad's study, when you actually, look at it, okay, so it was 9 versus 27 versus 45 sets, ostensibly, except that it was mostly compounds and they measured isolated muscles. So first, let's math this out rationally. You cut that set count in half, right? They did nothing but compound chest and measured triceps. It was not 9, 27, and 45 sets for triceps. More like 4.5, 13, and 22. Okay. I absolutely believe that 12 was better than 4.5. We're going from suboptimal volumes to up. Even then, we thought about 10 to 20. 4.5 to 12, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And 12 to 22, there was no improvement. Okay. 12 to 20, same fucking thing as always. It's the same for the others. If you go from suboptimal volumes and do more to an optimal range, yeah, you probably get more growth. But even if higher volume, that's what this paper showed, was that, as the volumes went up, growth kind of did. It was a big asymptote. Like, it never flattened out completely, but again, there's only a couple really high volume studies, super high volumes, but it was just the return on investment, right? The proportional gains for every, and like I said, this was in usually single muscle groups. This cannot be sustained or done.
Yeah, because they never factor in injury risk, these proponents of high volumes, even though Mike tried to walk it back. Yes, he is a proponent of high volumes.
Right, and they even said, look, these people obviously, the average length of the study was 10 weeks. Said, yes, these people obviously survived the training for 10 weeks, but that doesn't mean that in the longer term it would be sustainable or not cause burnout. Or since they're only looking at very individual muscle groups in these papers, because they typically measure, 1 or 2 tops, if that other work at these same high volumes might have a positive effect, negative effect, like you just, and again, it's not to say these studies are meaningless or useless or wrong. They have to be kept within the context. The study did what the study did. And the 52 set study looked at quads only for 2 weeks at the end of the study. That's it. To then go 50 sets per week per muscle group for everything, that is not how you extrapolate science. It did what it did.
Not. Yeah.
And that's exactly what everyone did. There's no such thing as joke volume, that 52 set bullshit last year. it was so bad. It was so badly misrepresented. Even the researchers had to get on Instagram and go, you guys are all misrepresenting what we did and what we found. Even the researchers were like, you guys are getting this wrong. And they were saying what I was saying. So, and then so on and on and on. And I'm saying the same things 2002, because nothing has meaningfully changed, in my opinion, about any of this. So then,
yeah.
So that's the volume thing.
In a video he did about Mike Mentz's training, he said, people have mischaracterized me as a high volume guy. He said that, when I've never been a high volume guy.
I was exploring earlier in my career maximum recoverable volume. So, advocating that, hey, like sometimes 25 sets a week is what grows muscle the best. It's, by the way, very true for many people in many cases. I got sort of this labeled as a high volume guy, which was always wrong anyways, as nobody who labeled me that had any nuance or actually read anything I wrote.
And yet, train more than the pros, right?
Well, and then you go back and look at what he was recommending in the MRV charts, and that is objectively provably false. But it doesn't matter, because the facts don't matter, and the evidence doesn't matter, and the truth doesn't matter in this regard. So then over the next 4 or 5 years, everyone started to walk their volume recommendations back. And I did a video a few years ago. Mike Israetel, Mr. Maximum Recoverer of Volume, this sort of defender of Brad's study, did a video that's titled, and I shit you not, are you doing too much volume?
Are you doing too much volume?
Well, yeah, because you fucking told them to, Mike. You lying sack. You told these people to do all this piss-ass volume. I don't think he's support those old MRV charts. Did you ever get a chance to see them? Hilarious. Utterly hilarious.
I couldn't find them. I went looking, but yeah.
I think I used to have a copy of it. I think they've been disappeared.
Well, certainly there's been stuff Mike's written that's disappeared from the RP website that I've only been able to find with web archiving tools.
But at one point, it was recommending 36 sets a week for abdominals, which makes me wonder why Mike never had any. But we'll get to that.
We will.
36 sets a week for traps. Jesus Christ. Are you kidding me? Hamstrings 4 times a week. There was no logic to any of it. Yeah. None. And people that did it got hurt. He cannot have forgotten what his old MRV charts were. He cannot have forgotten the videos that he has done previously or the workouts that he has shown. He cannot. And I bet if you asked him, he'd say, no, it's not true. It's amazing. But I've seen that on the internet for years. I've gotten into arguments with people, you have too. And they'll say something and you'll criticize them and they'll go, I didn't say that. And you show them a screenshot. This is what you said. And they'll go, no, I didn't say that. It's amazing. It's truly phenomenal to watch.
There's actually a great example of none other than Mike himself doing exactly this. Check it out.
But some people are like, yeah, man, Mike really wanted to turn pro to prove that his methods work. And I'm just like, whoa, if Mike was so unscientific to think like an N of 1 was going to prove anything, he'd have to retire his PhD and just cower and shame the rest of his life. Like, please don't tell me that. Like, that's absolutely not the reason I'm doing it.
So what is it? Like, I get everything you said, man.
The only reason I compete is to illustrate to people that marginally more than they would otherwise believe, the methods that we espouse at Renaissance Periodization are effective.
So transparent. I like it. So you think
that's absolutely not the reason I'm doing it.
Solomon Nelson actually did a really good video on that. I will link it below. But yeah, if you see it.
Also going back to the whole bar speed thing and technical form in this, there's a video somebody might put up about a bunch of people that like train under him or with him or something. And there's a bunch of guys using admittedly perfect form with the most piss ass weights you've ever, and he caught all kinds of flack for it. It's like, yeah, Mike, these people's form is meticulous, but they're not lifting real weight. This won't get you anywhere in the real world. And he probably took that down too, because Mike doesn't handle criticism well.
I looked at some Instagram comments on a post I made a little while ago about another lifter that's in our kind of little forum, and his great technique, and there's people on there just dunking on him. And the thing is, like, whoever you are out there listening to this, there's a very high probability that I'm much better at making fun of people than you are. As a matter of fact, I can sit face to face with you and slam dunk on your entire life. It'd just be real bad news. Things I wouldn't even feel comfortable saying that are just true about you.
Oh, this was another beautiful straw man. Mike has been thumping this from the debate. And he did this paper for the Strength and Conditioning Journal where he tried to make a case for this volume escalation model, having left out that this volume escalation model is utilized with a drug dosage escalation, because I know where that comes from. And then Eric Helms and his team rebutted that paper and tore it to pieces. It was phenomenal watching them just shred this thing. But here's what he said to me talking about the volume thing, about adding sets. And he goes, well, you can't add weight to the bar every week, and it may be safer to add sets.
Instead of squatting 400 pounds every single week, or anywhere between 400 and 420 for every single week for 6 weeks, but you add sets, instead of doing that, what you do is, 400, 410, 430, 440, et cetera, and you end up at 460 at the end of that 6 weeks. I think that ending up at 460 in what is now a high fatigue state and very heavy weights versus in a high fatigue state from the volume but with light weights, it is at least by no means clear to me that the volume condition is more likely to get you hurt. And if I had to take a gamble on it, I would say the higher intensity condition is more likely to get you hurt.
Well, when did I ever said you had to add weight to the bar every week? Never? Never. That's when I said it was never. It was a beautiful straw man. Because somehow in this industry, progressive overload has somehow come to mean you must add something to your training every week to make progress. And that's not what the term does or has ever meant. Progressive overload is over time. Let's say, whatever, your best 10 RM is 100 kilos and you're doing 85, right? 85%, which is a sufficient, or you're doing 100 kilos for 8 reps, right? 2 reps in reserve. We know that that's an overload. We know that that's a training stimulus. We also know that bar speed will slow. As long as that is still within, right? Until you have adapted to the point that 8 reps is 4 reps reserve or less, it is still an overload. That might be 2 weeks if you're a beginner. It might be a month if you're an intermediate. And it might be 8 weeks if you're advanced. The exact same workout in terms of weight on the bar, sets, and reps is an overload until it's not. And it's not when you've adapted to the point that it is not. That and overload and progressive overload have gotten confused in this industry. That's why I'm doing this long-ass series on basic exercise principles. They are different things. Overload is the cue. A workout, a week, even a month. The overloading workout you're doing is an overload till it's not. That's when you have to add weight. This idea that you need to add anything week to week to week. Only the HITers, I think, are still thumping that drum, and they're still wrong. Right? And it's funny because no other athlete, you don't see a track sprinter doesn't expect to go faster over 20 meters week to week to week. They may bust their nuts for 12 weeks to get 500ths of an improvement or, whatever. The point that I made, I kept bringing up Sumi in all these videos that I've done, right? I coached her for 8 years to a number of world records. I never deliberately took her to muscular failure once. She missed the occasional rep because that's what happens when you're training hard. I never had her deliberately go to muscular failure, ever, because it wasn't necessary. Now, she trained hard. She always trained within a 1 rep in reserve for damn sure. Never actually had her go, again, occasional misrep. It happens. It would take me 13 weeks to get her a 2.5 kilo PR, right? This is an elite powerlifter grinding to get 0.5% every 13 weeks and truly, exhausting work. So this idea that, but again, so think about it conceptually, in terms of volume versus progressive tension overload. In the short term, I guess, but this idea of starting with suboptimal volumes and building up to near breaking point volumes and then dropping back is just not a model I like. I would rather just pick an optimal volume and stay there until the adaptation occurs. And it's funny, if you read Helms's rebuttal to Mike's, they say the exact same thing. They're just none of this, you can't, the inferences Mike was making from the papers were not what the papers were saying. And the rebuttal, they just said, basically, you just stay at an appropriate volume based on science or past experience and add weight as you're able to over time. I'm like, well, gee, that sounds familiar. So I just prefer to, now there are exceptions if you're a beginner, if you're coming back from a layoff, where you may start with low volumes and have to build back up. That's a separate thing. If you're not long-term training, I'd rather just pick what I consider optimal volumes under a given set of conditions. Stay there. When the adaptation occurs, add a little bit of weight, do that for 8 to 12 weeks, back cycle, do it again.
Lyle, how about this gem? If you're getting stronger week to week, then you're undertraining. He may have walked back from this.
What?
Yeah. If you're getting stronger week, do you want me to send it to you?
No, I believe you. Getting stronger week to week, you're undertraining? Okay. Should you be getting weaker week to week? I mean, what was there more to it than just that one blank assertion? I mean, there
Well, I
never
sent
is.
you the timestamp so we can investigate.
Would you say 107 what?
10706.
Cool. Yeah, I think you know when it really comes down to is the application.
I think if you take Eric's approach and my approach and you integrate all of that together with proper deloading and active rest, the yearly average volume is probably going to be about the same. But the reason I push MRV is I say, look, within an accumulation phase, you got to fucking work hard. And yeah, you should barely just be able to recover. And there's lots of good data on this, that if you are getting people, here's a common question I get. I'm not getting stronger week to week. Am I training wrong? If you're getting stronger week to week, you're under training because you're obviously not supplying enough fatigue to have any kind of create any. You're not overloading properly.
Okay. I mean, both of those seem wrong. No, you shouldn't be getting stronger week to week unless you're a beginner to begin with. That's just dumb. That's old HIT stuff, but I don't see that the counter argument that is indicative of anything. But that must have been older. That's when Mike was still pushing maximal recoverable volumes. That, yeah. Oh, you got to generate all this fatigue and blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, no, just train at optimal volumes over longer periods of time. You get to the same place. You don't chase fatigue. You don't chase DOMs. You don't chase exhaustion. You chase progress. And this whole thing, I just don't know. I just don't know how to even respond to any of this anymore. It's all just so dumb. So, okay.
As Lyle and I have demonstrated, much of Mike Israetel's fitness advice is absurd, irresponsible, and lacking in scientific support. But how does Mike respond to criticisms of his information? We answer that question in the next chapter. A set taken to 0 reps in reserve, or 0 RIR for short, is a set where you couldn't possibly have done another concentric repetition. This is roughly how the final rep of a set taken to 0 RIR looks. 0 RIR is truly hard training. In 2020, Lyle McDonald made a simple observation watching one of Mike's workout videos. What Mike claimed were sets taken to 0 RIR were actually several reps shy of 0 RIR. Mike didn't handle Lyle's criticism well. In this chapter, we'll go over the context behind and specifics of Lyle's criticism, how Mike replied to Lyle, why Mike's reply fails, how Mike has contradicted his own reply in recent times, and what this all might say about Mike. Mike Israetel's bar speed bullshit.
Yes.
What is that, for those who are unaware? What was your original observation, your argument, your criticism, whatever? How did that arise?
The history of that. So 5 or 6 years ago, and I don't know what motivated me to do this, right? Like, so at the time, now really, Mike and I, we had talked, and we had debated Brad's volume study prior to this. And if you go listen to that, you can just watch him do what he does best, which is talk in circles, not say anything. But at the time, he was telling me, he was doing all these videos about, biceps workout to 0 reps in reserve, and showing this training that was nothing of the sort.
Folks, the sets are taken to 0 RIR.
Right? The definitions of 0 reps in reserve in the research and what happens at that point is very, very clear and very, very laid out, which is 0 reps in reserve means you could not do another full range repetition. There's all kinds of data. And so what he was telling people was wrong. And I was watching this, and I'm like, he was claiming the training that he was doing, he was claiming it was, to failure in 0 reps, and it wasn't. But I'm like, okay, I want to go ahead and make a point about, and also I think for some reason, I'm like, I decided to do this series on what muscular failure was. And it started there. And at this point, I was still writing on the website. I did videos as well. And I kind of did and now I just don't bother with the website because I don't think people read them anymore, by and large. So I just can't be by. It's too. So I did this whole examination of the physiology, and I looked at, the details in fiber recruitment and force output and this and that and the other. And like, here's what physiological muscular failure represents. And I was very clear in my language because I do try to be very specific. And that physiologically, it's when the muscle cannot produce sufficient force to get through the full range of motion, right? It's like not form failure, not volitional failure, which means people just choose to stop, which is an asinine definition. Like, I was very specific in my terms. And then I sort of use this as an opportunity to take a pot shot at Mike, to go, look, when you train to true physiological failure, this is what happens to bar speed. It goes fast, 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 slow, 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 grind, and then you miss, right? Yep. And I put up a bunch of videos. First, I took them of myself training, showing, look, here's what this looks like. And I got, again, this is when I was particularly motivated. I did a time analysis of the duration of the concentric rep, which was an absolute pain to do because I had to go, had to remember to put it in my video software and make it 60 frames per second and count frames. And it's an absolute pain to do. But again, spite is a fantastic driver for me. And I did all this, and I'm like, this is what failure is. And this is what Mike sets look like. And I basically called him out and going, Mike, what you're telling people is not failure. It's not 0 reps in reserve. You, sir, are lying to people. And I don't know if I put it in exactly that language, but that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
So you are telling people this is 0 reps in reserve. And it is not, because the bar speed is never slowing. Period. Because all the science says that that's what happened. All the videos, and I think this was probably later, because after everybody came in and attacked me in the comments with a bunch of bullshit, I said, well, fine, prove me wrong. I go, look, send me videos of you doing this. Prove me wrong. And I finally shamed a bunch of people, like 20 or 30 people sent me videos of them doing sets to true. And I did the same thing. I dropped it in my software. I did rep by rep analysis. And whether it was a set of 5 or a set of 12 or a set of 30, the last 3 or 4, it all showed the exact same pattern of slowing. I said, this is what physiological muscular failure looks like. And if the bar speed doesn't slow, you are nowhere close to 0 reps in reserve. Period. Science says it. The videos show it. Everyone who understands it shows it. Mike, what you're telling people is wrong. And he lost his mind.
Oh yeah, he didn't take your criticism so well. As it would happen, he responded to you in a video he did with his colleague, James Hoffman.
Lyle McDonald has watched some of our training videos and has concluded that because there is not as much of a loss in repetition speed towards the end as he would like to see, as he thinks is related to failure proximity, that we are very far away from failure. A couple of things wrong with that.
He raises 4 objections to you before going into an ad hominem attack on you.
Well, don't forget the first objection, which was, fuck you, Lyle.
You could have done 80 trillion more. Hey, Lyle McDonald, fuck you.
You know how to train a failure, Mike. It's sad. Mike thinks he can train a failure, but he really can't.
Because, I stand corrected, right? That is the ultimate rebuttal from someone who plays up the fact that he's an exercise scientist with a PhD. There is no greater fact than you, Lyle, along with having his 2 training partners say equally moronic shit in the background after doing their piss ass sets. Go ahead.
Let's review his responses other than simply "fuck you, Lyle." Number 1 is he takes technical failure very seriously. So whereas some trainees don't take technical failure so seriously, he holds himself back, fearing that the very next rep would be technical breakdown.
First of all, Lyle is talking about concentric failure, not technical failure. Technical failure is when you know your next rep, in order to be done, will have to be done improperly. Like you'll have to scoot your butt off of the leg curl machine in order to make it happen.
As RP goes, we're going to be sticklers on technique, and we always will be. And that's just our prerogative. Other people, maybe not. And I think that's where maybe there's like a little disconnect there.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. I just thought
no. Yeah. That's totally valid. So that's one concern, is the technical failure, absolute failure discrepancy. Another concern is, so at the end of the day, when we're going close to failure in our videos, we're going close to the point where we think in our heads another rep will result in very poor technique or significantly altered technique.
Oh, right, and this is on leg curl set. What do you think of that?
Okay, now if you go back and look at the article series or listen to videos, I addressed that, and I made it very clear what I was discussing. I was not discussing technical failure. I was not discussing volition. I was very clear in what I was talking about. He was making the argument about something I was not talking about because that's what he's best at. What technical failure is there to occur on a leg curl? We're not talking about back squatting. We're not talking about deadlifting. The simple fact is that if you have any decent skill, you can do barbell complex movements to physiological failure. Now, I'm not saying you should, and most absolutely shouldn't, because it can be very dangerous. But if you are a highly skilled lifter, you absolutely can do it without ever breaking form. I put up videos of myself doing it. I put up videos of other people doing it. Irrespective of that, there is no technical failure on a fucking leg curl or a leg press or a leg extension. Spare me. But since it was one of Mike's famous straw men, well, I'm stopping before technical failure. What technical failure is there to occur on a machine? For God's sake.
Maybe he's concerned about his back getting off the pad, which is hilarious because he did a video recently with some other fellow Aussie actually named Eugene Tao, something like that, where Eugene was talking about how he was back squatting 200 kilos and then had a spell where he became really neurotic about technical failure and had to go down to 80 kilos because he wouldn't admit of even a slight deviation in bar path or tripod foot or whatever. And Mike's sitting there nodding, going, oh yeah, you can be too neurotic about technical failure, right? So he's contradicted himself a number of years later.
I was hyper-focused on 2 things. My foot pressure, the weight on my heel, the weight on my the tripod stance, the heel, pinky ball of foot, and the ball of foot. I said you got to keep those things planted.
I see those videos. Yeah,
I've got hundreds of videos spanning about a surprisingly short amount of time of me squatting from the side, being like, "Oh my God, I can see that little millimeter shift forwards. My bar path wasn't perfectly vertical. I was dumping onto my knees and I can't go heavier. Yeah. I've got to regress again."
Yeah.
And it got me into literally, it was
the infinite regress.
Yeah. How much of this is really helpful for myself, but also for other people to be thinking about all these technical things? Is it really dangerous if your knees cave in a little bit on a squat?
Yes.
Maybe for some people, probably not for most people. Yeah. It's probably something that has to happen and is unavoidable.
Sure.
But I was back then, a little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous thing.
Sure.
And you get that, oh my God, over analytical. And, I was lucky that I got frustrated enough to talk myself out of continuing.
Yeah.
But that was literally, I would say, close to 2 years. It was at least the year between 1 to 2 years of me regressing myself, losing a ton of muscle and going very far backwards in my training, but deluding myself that it was a good thing. I was like, no, there's no point in me squatting, 5 plates when I can't squat 1 plate with perfect technique and it looks beautiful. And
well, there are multiple types of failure. And if you go look, I was so clear. I am talking only about because physiological muscular failure, which is simply when the muscle cannot generate enough force to get you through the sticking point to finish the repetition. Nothing more, nothing less. Absolutely. I care about the physiology because from a growth stimulus standpoint, your muscle doesn't give a shit that your form broke. Your muscle doesn't give a shit that you decided halfway through the set that you had failed, right? Your brain can't go, well, you could have done 12, but you decided that 6 was failure. I'm still going to adapt, right? Mike tried to make an argument along those lines somewhere as well. Something purely just nonsensical, right? From a physiological standpoint, the muscle only knows the amount of tension, fatigue, whatever, mechanotransduction, all that stuff that it is experienced. Okay.
Now, this objection seems completely ad hoc, but it's this. Mike deliberately slows his concentric repetitions from rep 1, so you can't gauge his proximity to failure based on the rep velocity throughout his set.
In addition to that, I think the failure stuff, people forget that they assume that failure training, there's a drop-off in velocity. The underlying assumption very few people state is that you're going for maximum velocity on every rep to begin with, and the only reason you slow down is you just can't go as fast. And at some point, the external velocity is identical, but the internal fraction of my muscles I'm turning on to keep that velocity up is higher and higher, and every rep is the same speed-wise, looking at from the outside. From the inside, I'm like, oh my fucking God, it's hard to keep up the speed. So then I might rack, and someone's like, dude, you never even slowed down. Like, inside the muscle, I depleted the entire time. But because I capped my velocity concentrically at the beginning, all you saw was the tiny little bit of a slowdown. But I promise, if I tried to do another rep, it's just not there.
Yes.
Sure you can. They do that in the research too. It doesn't matter what the speed starts at. As you get closer to 0 reps in reserve, it will get slower than that. Because there have been others that will use that they say that muscular failure is when you can no longer maintain the goal repetition cadence or tempo. It doesn't matter. If you start at a 2-second concentric deliberately, and of course, if you watch his videos, he's not doing that anyway.
No, he's not.
It's as explosive as anyone ever has. And in my little video, I put up a thing of him taking Chris Duffin through a set, and Chris is exploding on the concentric as well. So, because he was like, yeah, I use a speed cap, blah, 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 and stop when speed's slow. Like, this has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter what the initial speed is. As you get closer to 0 reps in reserve, it will become slower than that. Because it's simple, and it is honestly it is simple physics in terms of MA minus MG and the relationship of as muscular force output drops, maximum muscular force output, to the amount that's required, bar speed has to slow because your ability, doesn't matter where you start, it will still slow at limits, no matter what you do. I've done super slow. I've done that 10-second concentric stuff when I was hurt years ago. As you approach physiological muscle failure, it just gets even slower than that. It's basic physio, and literally every study done on bar speed, every single one of them shows this, that basically the final repetition of a limit set moves about as quickly as a 1-rep max, because in a physiological sense, that's what it is. So it doesn't matter. Again, that was just another, he was like, well, I'm already moving slowly, so you can't tell. Yeah, you can. Sure you can. It's a bunch of crap. Continuing to talk about this, because it bugged him so much that I called him out on this, because he complained to someone else. I know, man, what's up with Lyle and this failure? Like, it really got under his skin, which is perfectly fine with me because I was right. He spent the next 5 years. He was still doing videos about this. You know what the one thing he never ever did in the entire time? Was
actually
just doing
train to failure. Yeah.
And I said, it would take you 2 minutes. Just do an all-out set to absolute limits till it won't move anymore. And let's see what happens. That's all it would have taken to either prove me wrong or prove me right. Anyway, so that was number 2.
That was number 2. Instead, he would rather than, do an all-out set, continue with these asinine objections. What the hell was that?
I drank out of the wrong An old soda can.
Oh, okay. It happens. So objection number 3 is he's fast twitch dominant, unlike you, Lyle, which is what he specifies. So his reps don't actually slow down as he approaches 0 RIR.
Lyle McDonald has watched some of our training videos and has concluded that because there is not as much of a loss in repetition speed towards the end as he would like to see, as he thinks is related to failure proximity, that we are very far away from failure. Sometimes it's hard to tell externally when that happens, but unless it happens. Another thing is we're all much more fast twitch than Lyle because we actually have the genetics to grow muscle, unlike him. And that is meant as an insult because I don't like Lyle and I want him to feel ashamed of himself and to hate himself because he's a hateful person. By the way, I didn't start this fight. I'm just finishing it really well.
Fascinating stuff because you can go to any powerlifting meet and see grindy, slow reps. Are all those guys not fast twitch? I mean, is every person that's ever been in every single study magically not fast twitch? What does this have to do with anything, right? The fiber, like the fatigue profile might look a little bit different, but the drop in force relative to force requirements doesn't matter if you're slow twitch or fast twitch. It means nothing. It doesn't, because again, watch Olympic lifters who are as fast twitch as they get. You can watch them grind through front squats and grind through back squats, and their rep speed absolutely slows because I put up videos of them doing it. Is Mike going to say those guys aren't fast twitch? Okay, yeah. Cool story, bro. Next. I mean, like, it's just, the whole thing is just, it was excuses. Again, these are just like these weird side arguments that I'm not saying they don't have validity, but you can see just as many elite guys that will grind through the sticking point and take 10 seconds to finish a rep. Don't tell me they're not fast twitch. Yeah. I put up, eventually I'm just like, okay, look, I went and found videos of Dorian Yates training. That man went to failure.
Incontrovertibly.
I did the exact same rep speed analysis, and they all went to grindingly slow failure. They all ground at the end, where you even had a little bit of help from a spotter. Am I going to say that Dorian isn't fast twitch? Okay, cool story, bro. Mike, at some point later, I never followed the logic, tried to then somehow argue that Dorian wasn't actually going to failure in those sets. I can't follow his gibberish most of the time because he talks in circles for 10 minutes and doesn't say anything. But yeah, you can find lots of high-level bodybuilders that are all, I guarantee you, just as fast twitch as Mike. And those guys actually win competitions and their stuff slows down just like everybody else's. So moving on.
I'd like to voice objection number 4, which in my view is the closest one to just flat out admitting that you're right, which is basically, even if you are right, what does it matter? I'm still growing just fine, Mike argues, and sure, maybe it's the drugs and genetics, because for Lyle, it's all drugs and genetics, but also maybe I've got the whole bodybuilding training thing figured out, and I don't have to train as close to failure as Lyle thinks I do.
So the Lyle thing, lastly, is that he doesn't think that we're going close enough to failure. He may have a point, maybe we're not. But my counter to that would be close enough for what? Hypertrophic stimulus is the literature.
That's what I was thinking. Like,
sure.
What's your point? Like, it seems like they're doing just fine.
Right. First of all, but it could all be drugs. Of course, it's all drugs with Lyle. But in any case, he's just the world's worst fucking dog genetics for lifting, which I don't harp on him because, fucking shit sucks. Shit happens, right? So maybe Charlie and I and Jared are just getting to buy on a shitload of drugs and good genetics. But if you look at the actual data, which Lyle seems to be a fan of when it's convenient, the hypothesis that very close to failure training is incredibly more beneficial to muscle gain, it's just not in evidence. It's just not in evidence. Okay? You can train 3 or 4 reps away from failure all the time and be just about as big as anybody else. So I think we're probably getting 3 or 4 reps away from good technical failure or having a high degree of effort. And so far, I have not seen my results decline or inability to make gains because I'm not going close to failure. Furthermore, in my own training, I've experimented many, many times, often for years, but going much, much closer to failure, going beyond failure. I did not see any increase in results and often a decrease in results. So Lyle's argument about what he sees in the training videos is in bad faith, doesn't understand the complexities and background of what technical failure is to even make a decent point. And no one's having a problem. No one asked for his advice. So allow him to go fuck himself.
That never had anything
It wasn't
to do with
yes. Sorry, I won't interrupt you, but keep going.
No, that was the other tack Mike took, which was basically, I wouldn't let Lyle coach me and tell me how to train. Go back and look at any of what I did in the video. I never once criticized his training. Not once. I don't give a shit how he trains. I don't give a shit how anybody trains. I was criticizing his information. And I was extremely clear about this. Because again, I'm not saying that training failure is good or bad or indifferent. The point is that until you have determined where failure lives, you don't know what any of these metrics mean. But that wasn't going to change it. Mike, being a good politician, relies on people believing what he says I said rather than what I actually said.
Yeah.
Because later, this would spin out even further, and then I know we'll get to the next point. So then he started going on podcasts and just telling lies. He did a thing with Mike Matthews, and he said, Lyle advocates training to failure. Nope. Go listen to it. I never said, in fact, I said repeatedly, I'm not advocating you train to failure. I said it at least half a dozen times. Because at one point I made a collection of them and I never put it up. I went back through every video and collected every single time. I said, I am actually not advocating training to failure. I am saying this is what it looks like. And I was saying that what I will say, and I'll be very clear about this now, if you are going to try to use a reps and reserve approach to train, you must know what 0 reps and reserve actually is. And that absolutely means spending some amount of time training to absolute limits. In fact, hilariously, if you look at my body of work over 30 years, I arguably recommend training to true muscular failure, physiological muscular failure, less than most people in this industry. Most people in this industry go like, oh, you can take your final set to failure. You can do, it's way more nuanced than that because this whole discussion is just dumb as hell, not between you and I, in the industry, because we're leaving out too many variables. Whether or not failure is good or bad or indifferent depends on frequency and exercise and volumes, and there's all these other variables.
Yeah, so you were never saying he's training wrong for him, which is how he uncharitably misconstrued your point.
Sure, I never cared how he trained. It was about the information. He was misleading people. And
exactly. So it's not just that, and this was another thing that James Hoffman, whom Mike was talking to in his rebuttal to you, stated. He said, well, what's your point, Lyle? So what if Mike is factually wrong about what 0 RIR is? What's your point?
What is your point? So like, even if they are, their RIR calculation is off for whatever reason, like you can document the progress over time that you've been making. Sure. You know what I mean?
We make more progress, so they keep it safe.
So it's with your point, Lyle, it would be like a hilarious epiphany where it's like, oh, you can actually train 5 RIR and make huge gains when you're on drugs. Drugs are amazing, right? Like, that's great. Sweet. You don't have to train that close to failure.
Yeah, we'll tell everyone else on drugs to stop training to failure and endangering themselves.
So it's like, what are you trying to get out of it? He's just trying to just like a smear campaign,
which is
like hilariously misplaced. Like,
well, I think your point can be charitably interpreted this way. It's that Mike is a public fitness educator. He's an expert, the exercise scientist, as he likes to call himself. And he made his mistakes about how 0 RIR looks in public. And in so doing, he misled his audience about how failure looks, which means that his viewers, who are predominantly natural, might then go on to train way further from failure than they should because they trust him.
Yes, that was exactly.
They'll see bad results because they don't have Mike's drugs. So it's a public good to call him out on his misinformation, which is what you did.
And then I made that point very, very clear. He was telling people that these warm-up sets were 0 reps in reserve. He is misleading people that trust him. That's bad enough.
Yeah.
Worse is that he was so insecure. His ego was so hurt. He is such a fucking sociopath. He would rather continue to mislead these people than admit he was wrong about something. Right?
Right.
Life is very short.
It's embarrassing.
These people trust him to give them good advice. And he is wasting years of their relatively short training careers by not only providing that, which look, we all make mistakes. He wasn't making a mistake. I guarantee you he knew from the get. Maybe he didn't. We all make mistakes. And if you make a mistake and you're a man and you're an adult, you fix it and correct it. You don't triple down on it with lies and bullshit. Because he would then, it went further than that, right? So then he went and he debated Greg Doucette, right, about this. And despite the fact, I don't watch any of this, but I'm always informed on it. And Greg pretty much, wrecked him, because I don't particularly care for Greg's style of screaming at the screen, but whatever. He said I don't watch most fitness content. But pretty much my understanding is that Greg won that debate. Didn't stop Mike afterwards going to be like, yeah, I effed Greg in the A, because apparently that's something that you say as a PhD. There's this guy in my group, the lifting dermatologist. He had been on my Facebook group and had put up a video of himself doing an all-out set of chins to failure. And it looked exactly like all my sets to failure that I put up of myself and other people. And he let Mike spend an hour defaming Greg and I with the video title, "Who Would You Rather Coach You, Lyle or Greg Doucette?" Now, Greg is an IFBB pro who also is a judge. He has done more in bodybuilding than Mike ever has. But it didn't change the fact that Mike had an opportunity to just defame us, because he was like, I wouldn't have Lyle as my coach, and he sucked. Like, again, go listen to my videos. It's felt like, Mike, I wouldn't want to be your coach, because I don't coach uncoachable people. It was never about your training. It's never about me wanting to coach you. It's about your information. And he never addressed that. And he flat out said, Lyle advocates training to failure for all people under all conditions. And that is a bold-faced lie. It is a bold-faced lie. And you can go look at anything I actually said and see that it's a bold-faced lie. It didn't matter. People will believe what he says I said rather than what I actually said. And I've told a lot of people in this industry who defended Mike for that. I've just been like, you can get fucked. Which brings the last point.
Well, yeah, I think that's actually it. That was his rebuttal to you, such as it was in its entirety, except he did go on this ad hominem laden invective against you, where he said things like, well, this whole thing is about Lyle doesn't think I'm tough. Well, no one thinks you're tough, Lyle. And here's the reality. I can train closer to failure than you. I can do it for longer. I'm just better than you, Lyle, at every conceivable thing. I'm funnier than you, I'm smarter than you, and I'm better at being a C word than you. He literally said all of this.
It seems that everything he says about this comes from this perspective of we're not tough. Like that's the real gist I'm getting of it. He's like, you don't know how to train to failure. He goes, come over, and I'll show you how to train to true failure. I think it's like a wrestling coach kind of mentality of like, you don't know what hard is. Like, Lyle, nobody believes you're tough, nor will they ever. And also in every category of human behavior, I'm tougher than you. I can train closer to failure than you. I can do it for longer. I have more willpower than you. I'm just better than you, Lyle, in almost every way you can measure, except for probably weird masturbation habits and proclivity to play video games. You started this, Lyle. You made fun of me first in a way that was in bad faith and actually tried to hurt my feelings. The only reason I'm saying this is I'm just mirroring it back to you. So anytime you want to be nice, I can be nice to you again, Lyle. But if you want to keep being a cunt, I'm funnier than you, I'm smarter than you, and I'm better at being a cunt than you.
Oh, man. All right, folks, before we shoot ourselves in the foot, we're going to sign off on this one.
I'm smarter than you. I've got a higher IQ than you. And you can't handle it.
Oh, poo, Kim, I can smell your breath from here.
Did you know this?
Didn't he say he benched more than me in high school?
He said that too. Yeah.
Okay.
But that you can no longer find that, by the way, because that was something he said with Stephen DeVos, and he took that down.
Okay. Cool. I think most of those things are, I would have loved to have the opportunity to, take him through one of these high volume workouts, because I guarantee you he would have been puking his guts out for real, not performatively doing it on Instagram like he was there for a little while. Like I would have had him laying on the floor. I would love to have had the opportunity to have him go train with Dorian just once. He would find out what true failure training is. And but Mike would never actually put himself on the line. Like I said, all he had to do was one hard set. None of that had anything to do with anything. Certainly had anything to do with the evidence or the facts. It just had to do with him. Well, I can't bring anything approaching factual to this discussion, so I'll just attack him personally. And I know that my little 14-year-old moron followers would be like, yeah, fuck you, Lyle. Like, cool story, guys. I'm not saying to train like Dorian, but the point of this being that drugs make anything work. And the studies show that incontrovertibly. My point was never with this training.
Yeah.
And again, that was just him looking for anything other than addressing the facts. Because the science all said I was right. The 30 videos I put up all showed that I was right. And before he moved on, all he had to do was do one all-out set to prove that I was wrong. And the fact that he never did it tells you that he knew I was right.
For sure. Yeah, and he would rather just make all of these ad hoc rebuttals and attack your character and behavior than address the substance of your actual argument.
But he also knows that it'll work, right? Because if the people that had aligned themselves with him, right, and attached themselves to him and were going to double down and not want to admit that they'd backed the wrong horse, if they can look at the video evidence that I put up of this is what this set looks like and think that fuck you, Lyle, rebuts that, I'm sorry, they're beyond help.
Let's talk about the backpedal. So you're aware that Mike Israetel has inadvertently contradicted his own objections to you in some recent videos he's made. So for instance, he made a video criticizing Lee Priest's training. Lee Priest, the IFBB pro bodybuilder who stood on the Mr. Olympia stage and did very well.
Also he did he had the gall to criticize Dorian Yates's training.
Oh, right. Yeah. And Ronnie Coleman's and Jay Cutler's and more recently Tom Platz's. Anyway, so in his critique of Lee Priest's training, he states that Lee Priest can get away with predominantly sets of 6 to 8, because that's what Lee Priest did, because he's fast twitch.
But I think for Lee, barbells and sets of 6 to 8 work best because I believe his arms just have to be more proportionate fast twitch fibers than the average person's arms.
But also he observes that Lee Priest is training a few reps shy of failure on his curls. How does he make that assessment? Based on his bar speed.
Okay. Scott, was that a warm-up set or a work set?
All the sets look exactly like that.
Lee Priest seemed like never went to failure a day in his life from any video I have ever seen. I don't know what RIR that was, but it looked like 5 to me. It starts to illustrate that failure training is not a requirement for awesome gains.
So in this video, we have Mike admitting that even in fast twitch individuals, rep velocity is a gauge of proximity to failure. So he's contradicted the first 2 of his objections that he made to you. Sorry, the objections 2 and 3.
Yeah, okay. Seems about right.
Yeah.
But he knows that nobody watching his videos now will remember that. Right? This is the other problem with the fitness industry. Every 2 or 3 years, there's a new group of people coming in. So the people that are seeing his stuff now are like, well, that's completely, they won't see what he said 2 or 3 years ago, and that's probably part of why he deletes it, because he wants to make sure that is not available anymore. Yeah, he had the gall. The man that said you should only take advice based on how big someone is and who they've trained. He had the gall to go, Dorian Yates 4 times a week? That just doesn't seem like very much. Okay, so the whole bar speed thing, right? Like we had this years. I said, Mike, bar speed slows. That's what happens when you get close to limits. You need to, if it doesn't slow, it wasn't a work set. That's pretty much what I was saying. Wasn't saying you have to go to 0 reps in reserve, other than to know where it is. And then you can adjust your sets. So Mike, now that he's become a laughing stock as a bodybuilder, truly an internet. Yeah, truly a laughing stock. Somehow, like Schoenfeld before him, he's convincing all these high-end podcasts that he's an expert worth talking to. And he did something, some elite CEO strength cast, some bullshit. Somebody sent me, and he goes, go to this time point where Mike is talking about training intensity. And he says, so overload is important. And when you're watching someone do a set, if you can't tell if it was a warm-up or a work set, I'm paraphrasing, and you'll go find the clip. You'll probably put it.
I've seen it. Joseph sent it to me.
Yeah, and then you can't. He goes, if it's truly a hard set, then you should either be able, the effort should get hard, or it should start to get really hard and slow, where that final repetition looks like, and I'm like, you have got to be fucking kidding me.
Then we move in to the principle of overload, which means you have to challenge yourself. If most of your sets, someone else watching them can't tell if you're warming up or doing what's called a working set, like a real set, you have a problem. So towards the end of all of your sets, either the weights are slowing down, or even if it's the same speed, to you, they feel perceptively harder. You know, you do this, this, and in a couple reps, you're like, that's what you want.
Now, he did qualify that with an, or it has to feel
Yeah.
perceptively more difficult.
Whatever. Nobody knows perceptively harder for shit. He knows it. I realize that he qualified that. But even to give that example, that it should do this slow grinding effort. Okay. Cool. Okay. Now, would any of these people who've ever backpedaled, who've ever walked it back, ever have the guts to go, yeah, well, I was right? Of course not. Because they'll just pretend never happens.
Yeah.
They'll pretend never said what they said. They'll
It's
ignore
easier
it.
that way.
And if anyone, I mean, although I'm told, again, I don't read YouTube comments. I don't go into that. However, I do see them every once in a while. More and more people are waking up to it.
One of Mike's notable responses to Lyle was a sarcastic comment about Lyle's physique reflecting on his expertise.
Lyle, listen. We don't know how to go to failure. Your physique reflects your knowledge?
This raises an important question. Does Mike meet the same standard he uses to dismiss Lyle? In other words, if Mike's physique reflects on his knowledge, then how knowledgeable is he? We ponder this question in the next chapter. By Mike Israetel's own admission, he effed up in competitive bodybuilding.
I don't know why I fucked up.
In this chapter, Lyle and I examine the reasons why Mike's competitive bodybuilding career has been a failure. We speculate about issues that Mike can fix, ones that he can't, why Mike doesn't or perhaps can't fix his problems, Mike's relationship with his coaches, whether Mike's competitive bodybuilding career was doomed from the outset, the extent to which Mike's failure in competitive bodybuilding speaks to his expertise, or lack thereof, and what Mike should do from here on out. Mike Israetel has expressed his ambitions publicly to become an IFBB pro bodybuilder.
So for me, I'd love a go kick in the pants to kick me out of the sport with a pro card. And I can't quit bodybuilding before I at least take a nice big sword swing at that shit. My best. And if my best isn't good enough, whatever. Like, I'll just settle for being a, jiu-jitsu killer, famous millionaire. Fine. But like, oh man, I want that shit.
However, Mike hasn't had the success he sought in competitive bodybuilding. And this is despite having a $250,000 home gym, training in excess of 6 times a week.
I train with weights a lot, 10 times a week. I walk 12,000 steps a day, and I train jiu-jitsu and all the stuff.
Being on a dangerous, life-shortening cocktail of drugs, which we went through earlier, coupled with his morbid obesity, and also ostensibly having committed his entire life to bodybuilding.
When I want to put my full force behind something, it's a professional effort. I am a sports scientist after all. What am I going to do? Like lift a couple weights and go on stage? No, I'm going to run my life around this. So I really want to take that shot at it because it would be an awesome finality.
Mike's placings have been abysmal. And after a dreadful showing just a few months ago, where he placed 6th at a relative nothing of a show, he announced that he was going to step away from competitive bodybuilding. As you'll recall, Lyle, Mike Israetel appeared on Stephen DeVos's, that is, the Lifting Dermatologist's podcast, well, now deleted podcast episode from a few years back, in which Stephen asked Mike whom he'd rather have as a coach, you or Greg Doucette.
Yep.
And in response, and we went through this, to Stephen's question, Mike proceeded to slander you as a person and as a coach. Now, right now, I want to be to you what Stephen DeVos was to Mike Israetel. So could you remind me, what in your perspective as a coach, are the problems with Mike's approach to competitive bodybuilding? And how would you help Mike if you were his coach?
In the first case, and again, I made this point numerous times during the videos I did, which is I would not coach someone like Mike because Mike is fundamentally uncoachable. But he's uncoachable in the sense that he is like many athletes I've known before, in that he's the kind of guy that would hire an expert, because I've known some of his previous coaches, think he knows better. Because Mike has the problem of thinking that, well, I have a PhD and I know this and I'm a drug expert and I'm a this expert, ergo I know better than my coaches.
You are presuming you know more than me about the thing I'm one of the top experts in the world in, and also the thing I'm literally involved in myself. So whatever ideas you have about how I can improve, just fuck right off.
So he would hire someone, not listen to them, and then blame them for his failure. I've known athletes like this before. They are uncoachable for that reason. But he wouldn't even listen to his coaches, because I know one of, well, his ex-coach, and I've heard the stories that I won't share because he and I discuss these things privately. And he's told me some of the questions that Mike, world's bodybuilding expert, has asked him, and he doesn't know shit. Like basic stuff that you would know, like just amazing stuff. Well, the one that was relayed to me, Mike called and asked, so how can you tell if it's water or that you're just still fat? Wow, did you get your PhD out of a Cracker Jack box? I mean, it's real simple. If as a bodybuilder, if you think it's water, you're fat. Sorry, it's just that simple, right? Trust me. But you should know that if after that many years he doesn't know the difference, come on.
I have like big love handles that store a lot of water from back when I got fat on purpose to try to like do the spirit bulk.
Well, failed bodybuilders like Mike tend to surround themselves only with people who tell them what they want to hear.
In general, if anyone looks at Mike and they're like, if they're either even like, are you natty? Or if they're like, I'm not impressed by your physique, then they're just clueless.
Yeah.
Mike has objectively pro bodybuilder level stats.
And you see this all the time. Some guy at the gym and all his buddies are like, yeah, man, you look great. You look this. And then they go to show and they get hammered. And it's like, it's all politics. This is bullshit. You look great, right? And then that's all they'll listen to. And that is Mike. Mike handles criticism like a 5-year-old who's had a cookie taken away from him, i.e., like a petulant child.
It's very funny that you should bring this up, his inability to take criticism, because there's this, after one of his dreadful showings, where he, in his own words, fucked up, he goes on a podcast, I don't know why I fucked up. And if you think you do, then you're presuming that you know more than me about something I'm one of the world's top experts in and am involved with myself. So just fuck right off. That's what he says, like almost word for word.
Lane Norton
committed it to memory.
Lane Norton has said similar things to the effect of, if you can't squat more than me, you have no business. You can't tell me how I can go watch it. His squat is tragic. He's blown his back out twice. He's another person who never listened to anybody else and will not accept criticism. So on the one hand, Mike is uncoachable. But let's say I was going to coach Mike, and I did. I did a couple, but I made a bunch of videos years ago. I never did anything with them where I looked at some of his previous. Because if you look at his early bodybuilding pictures, they're even worse. One of his early, he didn't even have an ab, much less abs.
He looked a dreadful case of gynecomastia.
Well, I think that was the next show. I mean, like I went and just picked random pictures off Google. I didn't try to correlate them with when or where it was. I didn't care that much, other than just go, look, this is Mike on stage. This is how I would objectively, what I would have done. So in those early ones, I mean, he was months out of shape. And had I been coaching him, I would have flat out said, you're not going to make it. Pick a later show. Or I'm going to have to put you the ringer and do an aggressive diet because that's the only chance you've got of making it.
It's
now,
funny. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mike Israetel goes in a podcast with Steve Hall that he says something to this effect. Well, people say, you could just do a protein sparing modified fast, but I know what happens to me when I do that. I just lose muscle and I look worse overall. So it turns out I misremembered Mike's reasons for not wanting to do a protein sparing modified fast to get in shape for his bodybuilding show. For those who don't know, that's a diet where you only eat protein and only take in trace carbs and fats. Still, the reasons Mike gave for not doing a PSMF are dumb, even dumber, arguably, than what I thought he said originally. I've written my thoughts on screen.
Like, if it was all willpower and grinding, willpower I have. I could just not eat. I could just straight up not eat or just eat protein. I've done that before for weeks on end. And if all that worked, it would work. But it doesn't, because your training energy goes to shit, and all this other crazy stuff happens with body water.
Okay. That's bullshit. Okay. This idea that, I mean, that's a whole separate thing, that you lose more. I mean, no, what happens is you flatten out and you run out of glycogen and water and you lose lean body mass. But apparently Mr. PhD doesn't know the difference between lean body mass and muscle mass. So, okay. He's not alone in that, but two different, yeah, you will flatten out. And as soon as you carb load, it comes right back. So that would be number one, is if I'd been coaching him for that first show, the one where he went up with 0 abs on stage, you have to be at a certain place by a certain time point to have a chance of making it stage. Especially, I mean, we know what modern conditioning requirements are. We know how lean you need to get. We know where you need to be. And part of being a coach is looking at that physique and going, you're not going to make it, no matter what we do, or without going super aggressive. And even then you might not make it. Pick a later show. Then, so that would be a general statement about that. But I think if you look at his and then the next show, yeah, his gyno, he was a little bit leaner in his terrible case of gyno. I think that's
which he presumably had cosmetic surgery to fix.
I think so. I think you're right. I think if you look from that point to the next.
Gynecomastia is a risk in males. I've actually had gynecomastia removal surgery myself, because I got gyno and I was like, that, I don't need this in my life. So that's, it's a cosmetic, but a very annoying and a big deal.
Something I will tell people, I tell naturals this all the time when they ask, how long of a contest diet should I do? I go, well, take how long you think it will take you and double it. Because trust me, your body fat percentage is higher than you think, and the fat loss will be slower than you hope. And all the theoretical calculations never work out. Now, can you start too early for contest prep? Sure. But you can always slow a diet down a lot easier than you can speed it up. Right? If you get behind, it can be done. Right? If you're willing to suffer for 2 weeks through a protein sparing modified fast or RFL or whatever, it can be done. It's a whole lot easier to slow it down if you're ahead of schedule. Right? I'd rather have someone be ready 2 weeks out so they can cruise into the show than be like, all right, we have to diet you up till the Wednesday beforehand. Like, in which case, you know. So the learning from that, the learning should be, okay, this show I dieted for 12 weeks. I didn't make it. I should probably start earlier next time, or leaner, right? One of the two, or both. Because if you go look at Mike's pictures, because like, you know, like all good narcissists, he's got to put up endless pictures of his physique on his Instagram, because nothing screams academic. Nothing screams academic like shirtless selfies and butt and gluteal moon poses. Nothing screams academic to me.
I think even by bodybuilding standards, some of his uploads are a little lewd.
Yes. Oh, yeah, exactly. Because people insist on sending, like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see Mike doing a bent over, grab your ankles moon pose. They banned it for a reason. And one thing that ran through Mike's post-contest excuse making, yeah, needed 4 or 5 more weeks to really get into shape. You shouldn't say that more than once, right? You shouldn't ever say, I needed more time. Why didn't you start this prep earlier? Why did you not learn from your past show that you need longer? Like I said, you're always better off starting too soon rather than too late, because you could always slow it down. And honestly, in the modern era, conditioning standards are so high, unless you are dead, you really can't be 2 conditions. You can't. Not in bodybuilding. In the other shows, in the other divisions, maybe.
Yeah.
But he never learned. But then you see him in the off season and he gets positively sloppy.
Oh yeah.
He gains way too much body fat in the off season. And this was last year. He put up some picture of him hack squatting shirtless, big old belly, and everybody jumped on the comments. And he got super defensive about, oh no, it's postural, and everyone in my family has this big distended gut.
Later down the line, I'll probably get some plastic surgery going. I have like big love handles that store a lot of water from back when I got fat on purpose to try to like do the spirit bulk. And so I'm probably going to get them shits cut off and maybe even get my waist tightened, because like genetically, everyone in my family has a pot belly. Like you've seen my like waist in, waist out shit. I'm just tired of having a big gut all the time. So I might have that. I've got some consults lined up to see if they can cinch it in.
No, Mike, just that. Yeah, it's pitiful. It's pitiful. So, you don't get so sloppy in the off season. That's because he apparently thinks that a giant bowl of Captain Crunch post workout is how you get the optimal results. Lots of sugary cereal. So he tended to get real sloppy in the off season.
Mm.
Mike made the same mistake every single time. That would be followed by excuses. One of my favorites being, because this is when he left his original coach and went to a new guru, who I also know, and I won't name him because I do like the guy. I mean, I like both of them, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to a new guy to really help me with his diuretic protocol, a new water guru. And I think not this most recent show, the one in 2023, and he said, yeah, my body holds water differently than other people's.
I also have quite unique physiology. It would take me like 2 or 3 days of water depletion to look my best. And almost everyone I talked to at the time was saying like water depletion is overrated. You don't even need to peak, which for people on drugs and people with my physiological response is like backwards, total nonsense. And so I ended up carrying 20 pounds of body water on stage. It was thoroughly embarrassing.
You're a unique snowflake, Mike. It's amazing. Translation for people that don't know this area, that means you fuck your diuretics, right? Duchesne used to write about that. It also means people want to think that the fat they haven't lost is water. They want the magic water pill. And you can't dry out fat.
And so I ended up carrying 20 pounds of body water on stage.
There were a number of things that I would identify. Like, again, if I were coaching Mike,
yeah.
One, he needed to either start leaner or start his diet earlier, period. He just never got lean enough. I mean, he got leaner over his career, but in the last 2 shows, he said, yeah, I needed about 5 more weeks. Yeah, maybe 3 months, realistically, to get to where you needed to be. He was never dry. Because again, all the dryness in the world doesn't matter if you're still carrying body fat, because you can't dry fat. He never got lean enough. In the era of the internet, you know what you're supposed to look like. And yet, but anyway, Mike got lean-ish. He never got nearly as lean as everyone else. He didn't get as dry as anyone else because he just started too fat and didn't diet long enough. I think he would have done better smaller.
Yeah.
With a tighter waist, way better abs. Obviously leaner and drier. Like conditioning at least can make up. If you can be freak conditioned, that can at least, make up for some of it. His logic, I think what he figured is, well, the reason I didn't place is I'm not big enough. That was the trap he fell into. And bodybuilding, yes, the mass monsters do rule the world, but even those big guys, they're taller and they have the lines to pull it off. And there's still a lot of people don't. I mean, even Dorian, he competed at what, 280, 275? He was also pretty tall.
Yeah,
and
he had 5'9" or so.
Yeah. So, and the human body, it scales fractally as, height, area, and volume scale, linear by the square and by the cube. So you tend to stretch things out a little bit more. If you squash Dorian down to Mike's height, he would look like a square, right? You just can't. Bodybuilding is still about symmetry and shape and lines and all that stuff.
I will
But
say,
guess
though, the recent trend in competitive bodybuilding has been they're getting shorter. I think if you look at height trends in the Mr. Olympia,
Okay.
the average winner has been getting shorter over time.
Which I don't follow. I truly have never. Because again, I find most sports boring unless I'm competing someone. The problems are what interest me. Dieting someone down to 4% without muscle loss fascinates me. What happens on stage, I couldn't give a damn.
Yeah.
Again, unless same with powerlifting. I would never go watch a powerlifting meet if I was not handling someone because I find it utterly boring. I watch skateboarding. I like watching that. That's fun, but that's also not. It's barely a sport. Whatever.
Yeah.
So I think where was I going with this? The macros are. I mean, what he was eating was fundamentally dumb, but it would have worked if he just started early enough. I mean,
and
truly.
we're in a deficit. I mean, that much we don't even know.
And yes, and I mean, I don't know if Greg ever added up what he was supposedly eating. I mean, obviously he was losing fat to some degree. He just didn't get the last 5 kilos off. And if you're not lean enough, all the dehydration in the world won't do you any good. But if I had someone like that, you fire them because because they'll hire you, ignore what you told them, and then blame you when they fail. But Mike had that. The ego is one thing, but he never learned from his past experiences ever. It wasn't even people telling him what he was doing wrong. You should be able to look at what happened and go, well, I needed 5 more weeks. Well, then why did you start your diet too late the next time around? Oh, I started too fat. Well, then why didn't you start leaner? The inability to learn from past mistakes is baffling. But that goes along with it's part of the narcissism. Nothing is ever your fault. Ever. Which means why would you ever need to analyze what went wrong? Or adjust it or fix it? Better just blame your tanning company. Still, for fuck's sake. That's just beyond, right? That's just absolutely, that's even worse than it's all politics, which was the old one. That's just beyond as an excuse. The excuses about the tan were truly pitiful. The people that aren't aware of this drama, in his last show, he said that the reason he didn't place higher because he didn't get the right tan. And I think he blamed his tanning company.
So we got tanning done by a tanning company. I won't say them what name they are because that's just not polite. But they under-tanned the living crap out of me, apparently.
They were the ones that kept him. Sure. If after a decade plus of competing, you cannot figure out how to get your tan right, you are truly a fuck up. I mean, truly. But wasn't his fault. It was the tanning company's fault. Sure. And I believe he even claimed that if he'd had a tan, the judges told him he would have placed higher. No judge would ever say that. Sorry. They wouldn't. Now, the argument people will make, and I think Mike even said this, at one point, he was making a pre-excuse before the show. He said, well, I just do this for fun. Oh, bullshit. People run marathons for fun. People will powerlift for fun occasionally. Nobody puts themselves through the grind of drug-fueled bodybuilding for fucking fun. But he was
not with the drugs.
I don't care about the placing. I'm just doing this for fun. He was making a pre-excuse for his shit. Come on. Nobody does this shit for fun. Right? There are rec marathon runners. There are not rec sprinters, right? Whatever. And Greg Doucette did that hilarious video tearing. Mike's contest diet is just baffling. Gatorade and what? Sugary cereal post-workout, and I guess Subpar Powerlifting did a meme about this, which I thought was, even they're jumping on him. I thought it was hilarious. And I guess at one point he was eating protein bars and soft tortillas. Who the fuck eats like this on contest prep, right? Look, I'm all for flexible eating, I'm all for clean eating being a like, don't get me wrong. Like I wrote about it first. But we can argue about the lore of contest dieting till the cows come home. We can. But success does leave clues to some degree, to at least some degree. There is a reason that most people do things more similarly than not, because it's what works.
Yeah.
And yet somehow Mike thinks he's special and unique and does not that on any level.
It's baffling. I don't understand how he has no grasp of how to diet for a show, despite being so deeply immersed in the bodybuilding world. I mean, like you were saying, you figured it out decades ago with the flexible dieting thing, but it's become widespread, right? Like, and it's dead simple. Yet somehow an expert like Mike seemingly can't cook one of the literally hundreds of high volume protein, fiber, whatever frankenfood recipes that you can find online. He's eating Cheerios and drinking Gatorade instead. How?
Right. It is truly baffling to me, especially for someone that's going to go on about, I'm an expert and I know this and my top level nutrition, and like, nobody eats like this during contest prep. They don't. I eat better meals as general eating. Like, if I weren't with you, I was going to be having steamed vegetables with chicken breast and rice for dinner tonight, with some pint. Like, I don't get that. Like, again, fine, you want to have the occasional thing, but his contest diet is nothing like what literally everyone else that's ever been successful in the sport has ever done. Ever. Even the dumbest bodybuilder with no degree, with no anything, could figure out and look at what other people have done for contest prep and make it work, right? There are, Duchesne once pointed out that most bodybuilders are not rocket scientists. And they're not, because he even said, he's like, how hard is it to diet from 10% to contest level? It's not, right? I heard pro bodybuilder years ago say this is the approach to contest prep. It says, buy as many drugs as you can and starve for as long as you can stand it. That's contest prep in a nutshell. Because when you got drugs to solve all the other problems, you just got to starve. You just got to go the distance. There's way more concerns as a natural. Talk about muscle mass loss. There's a lot of other variables that go into that, which is why it's a more interesting problem and why I've spent so much time addressing it. But there is so much information to just go find a basic contest prep diet. Even again, we can argue about clean versus unclean, flexible. Don't care. Doesn't matter. We know what works to 95% success rate, and the dumbest fucking bodybuilder in the world can go read the dumbest fucking article on bodybuilding.com and figure it out. And yet, exercise scientists who critique Story and Yates can't do it. But even without that, even without having learned to do it as a natural, Mike could follow the most generic dumb diet on bodybuilding.com and just do that. And it would work if he started early enough. So there's the leanness was a big part of it. That's pretty easy to solve. I mean,
what would you do on the diet front as his coach?
I mean, again, get him to spend that money he spent on 4 lateral raise machines for a $30,000 home gym. Dude, pay someone to do your meal prep for you. Get one of those food delivery systems to deliver you proper bodybuilding food. For fuck's sake. I eat better than that. Start sooner. I mean, it's really just that. Don't get as fat in the off season and start your diet sooner. Just that. Just to make sure that you stay on schedule.
Yeah.
Without once you throw drugs into the mix, anything works. And that's why that training is all over the map. Because it doesn't matter. Lightweights, heavyweights, high volume, low volume. Usually the right training is whatever the current Mr. Olympia is doing. So when Dorian was winning, that was blood and guts was the way to train. When Ronnie was winning, it was high volume and et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, you find that it doesn't really matter.
Because of the drugs. I mean, in keeping with that, as far as coaching Mike goes, would you do anything differently with his training?
I mean, I honestly don't know. Like, it's so hard to pin down what he's exactly doing since he seems to change his tune every single time. I mean, it seems like his training seems random to me. So the MRV chart is like, Hamstrings 4 times a week. Why? I mean, realize this is the same industry that, like, in one breath, they'll say, oh, the research doesn't support more than once a week, and then go, well, I'm doing high frequency. Like, there's no consistency to any of it. Like, I don't know that I don't know that it matters. Like, genuinely. Like, I mean, yeah, it obviously got him big, along with the drugs he was taking. Do I suspect he could take a lot lower doses with more well thought out training? Yes. Does it really matter? I mean, he's right in the sense that, what's the point? Well, my point is that the information you've been telling people is wrong. The other point being that how you train, I don't give a fuck about.
Yeah.
So it would be more about, like, okay, what are strong and weak body parts? I mean, that's where bodybuilding gets so different. This dumb video I finally did, it's like, the training is about muscles, not movements or performance. It's about, like, okay, if this muscle group's fine, let's cut back the volume here and, you know, bring up weak points or whatever it is. But with Mike, I think it would be more just scaling his entire body size down.
Mm. How about the drug standpoint? Would you change anything there?
I don't know enough about it, honestly, and I don't know his full stack. Like, well, I know enough to be dangerous. I just, like I said, my feeling based on the coaches I know whose opinions I do trust is that when you do more than random bullshit training, and I mean, progressive tension overload still, like, you can't just push weights heavy all the time, but you can get away with lower doses if you are training more, just better, more intelligently, more reasonably, probably, and there's a fine line, right? Like, again, I'm not saying going to failure, but there is a big difference between literally 8+ reps in reserve, right? Like, I put up in my little internet bullshit thing, I put up a video that I'd been saving for years, of Mike taking Chris Duffin through a set. There was this, every once in a while, it's like, powerlifter does bodybuilding work, and it's just dumb social media bullshit. And so the video, if people who haven't seen it, Mike is talking Chris Duffin, who's a top-notch powerlifter, and I'll make it clear, this is not aimed at Chris. This is not a criticism of him. He showed up and did what the video told him to do. Okay, this is about Mike. Mike's talking through the set, and I only got the people doing Renaissance periodization videos thought that they were fucking movie directors. Oh my God, just set the camera down and quit it. You're making me nauseous. Like, so I don't know how many reps he had done. It started in the middle of the set. And so he gets 3, 4, and Mike goes, all right, good set. And Chris stops and goes, can I keep going?
One more, you got one more, let's go. Yes. Good stuff.
Mike goes, oh, you want to keep going? Let's go.
You want more? Go.
Chris pumps out 8 more.
I counted 7.
Whatever. Something like that. And still, in my opinion, his bar speed his movement speed still didn't really slow. And he was accelerating the concentric. And again, it's how Mike was talking him through it. All right, explode, squeeze, bullshit, slow, controlled, concentric, speed cap, lying, bullshit, right? And he stopped. So he got 7 more, and I could have got him through 2 or 3 more grinders, at least. Mike stopped that set at least 7 reps from, and probably more than that. That's what Mike thinks his works at. It's just that simple. And of course, Mike can argue about that back forth, but the fact that he never actually showed a limit set. I mean, we don't know for sure, but I can guarantee you that that's what he thinks is one. That's enough. You've done some. That's enough.
Yeah, and it may well work with all the drugs, as you pointed out.
But is it? But even with the benefits of the drugs and all that they do in terms of recovery and growth and everything else, I do think a mistake people make, at least that I've read of people making, is they fall into the trap of, oh, well, I'm taking this, so I'm just going to do double the volume. Failed athletes make excuses. And the athletes that become great fix problems. And that's something Mike was never willing. Well, he did. He tried to fix it by just throwing more drugs at it. He figured that he thought retatrutide was going to be the big magic pill because it's new and it's special, and he thought it was going to do a lot more than it actually did. But GLP-1 drugs are a whole separate thing for why that wasn't. And you're not the first one who mentioned to me that the appetite thing, that Mike's probably the type that when he goes off of it, he'll just start going back to overeating even more because he wasn't using it as an aid to his already super strong willpower. He was using it as a Band-Aid solution.
He's got more willpower than you, Lyle.
I have more willpower than you?
Okay.
Got more willpower than just about everyone on Earth, according to him.
Things like you just need to learn to put the fork down and shit like that. And what I wanted to say is I should want to reach out to them and say, you've never met anyone with as much willpower as me. I don't guarantee that. The statistics are what they are, but I'd bet a decent chunk of change on it. And whatever it is you think you're good at in your life, I'd probably take about a year and become an authority in the field in which you think you're good.
Well, and his results certainly, that's why he's gotten the results that he has, apparently. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? And the pudding was in his post-workout meal.
Yeah.
Come on, that was good. Somebody told me once, Mike, whenever people criticizes him, he'll rage against them to the effect of, I could be better at what you do in a year and I'll destroy you and I'm so much better than you. Like, dude.
Yeah.
Seriously, man, you need to, like, Mike, I mean this very genuinely if you're watching this. There's many brands of decaffeinated coffee that taste just as good as the real thing, buddy. Like,
yeah, it's something like this.
Lane is warring with everybody over everything at all times. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Guys, it used to be about the science. It used to be about the music. What happens? I don't know if they bought into their own hype or what, but somewhere it changed.
I think when it comes to diagnosing Mike's fundamental issue, I think a part of it could be that he never figured out how to do it as a natural beforehand. I mean, it's said that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, and here you've got a guy who bulked up to 270 pounds at 5'6". That's morbidly obese.
Oh,
Find me the single natural bodybuilder. You won't find me a single natural bodybuilder nor strength athlete of that size who's competing at a high level. The only reason why anyone ever gets that big is a lack of control over appetite.
Well, yeah, I'll come back.
Yeah, he says that you've never met someone with as much willpower as me.
They would say things that really got under my skin. And things like you just need to learn to put the fork down and shit like that. And what I wanted to say is I should want to reach out to them and say, you've never met anyone with as much willpower as me. And whatever it is you think you're good at in your life, I'd probably take about a year and become an authority in the field in which you think you're good.
Sorry, but Occam's razor simply suggests that he can't control his appetite, and that's why he can't get in shape. So I think he should never even gotten into it in the first place.
That's why he also made a big deal about using a brand new drug. He used retatrutide as his new dieting drug, which is GLP-1 drugs is my current area of interest, but we can talk about that a whole separate thing later to try to fix it. And yes, I do think the natural thing is a big part of it. This goes about something I mentioned that Duchesne said, is that when you can simply throw more drugs at the problem, you never actually learn how to train or eat because you don't have to. And that will get you obviously pretty far, right? Hit a plateau, up the dose. Why examine your training? Why adjust what you're doing when you can just take more, right? And again, I know I've known coaches who've worked with drug-using bodybuilders and who use, because like make no mistake, drugs will beat scientific training, perfect training every single time, period. Duchesne once famously said, with the new supplement technologies, natural bodybuilders will surpass drug users, which is both hilarious. It's so hilarious. Like whatever. However, drugs plus good training will beat drugs plus shitty training. And I know enough coaches that have worked with drug using bodybuilders who were just throwing higher doses at it and put them on better training. They got better growth, usually with less, right? I've got a good buddy, and he heals about 240 lean year round. The most he's ever used to grow is 500 milligrams a week. And he maintains on 200. But that's because he lives the lifestyle. He knows how to train and he knows how to eat. And he figured that out. So yeah, I do think that's part of it.
I think it helps to have a background in here's how to diet naturally without a cocktail of drugs before you decide to take that next step.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like,
No,
wouldn't you at least want to know that you can get truly ripped with no or minimal drugs before trying to get a pro card? I mean, it was almost doomed from the outset. Here in Mike, you've got a guy who's just way too big for no reason as a natural, all of a sudden deciding that he wants to be a pro bodybuilder.
But did he compete naturally?
No,
I don't know.
He didn't. He just went straight on drugs and then started going for these very lofty ambitions. Take it till you make it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, I know you and I probably, I know you have a very different stance on this, but even the people that talk about drug using bodybuilding talk about, yes, you need to learn what you're doing as a natural first. But there were fundamentally much larger problems with Mike's as a bodybuilder, which is that his terrible lines, no waist, no shape, no symmetry, terrible muscle bellies. There was nothing he could have ever done that was like bodybuilding is one of those awful sports that certain factors about your shape, muscular tie-ins, are immutable. And the best are born with them. And if you do, and especially at the higher, like you can get by at the lower level without having that. But as you get to the top level, everybody knows how to, everybody has the same drugs. Everybody, there's a limit to how leaner you can. It's a matter of were you born with the right shape? And Mike never had it. Period. But I think he went even beyond that, right? Because, I mean, he had a thick waist. He had terrible high lat tie-ins, just terrible shape in general. But he exacerbated that. And I think that was a lot of what Greg Doucette, I didn't listen to Doucette's videos, but I think same thing. Pretty much just like Mike was never going to be successful at that sport. Never. Like I said, it is one of the most genetic competitions in existence.
It's funny, our mutual friend Joseph shares the same perspective. He goes, Mike had terrible genetics, sadly for him. And it's just a case of him with all of his drugs and training and everything, polishing a turd. And I replied, polishing is generous.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, it is the reality of it. If you're not cut out for a sport, it is what it is. And this would have been, like I said, if I were coaching Mike, the biggest suggestion I would have made to him. He's what? 5'4", 5'5" on a good day. He's not tall.
5'6".
I don't even think he's 5'6". Regardless, he's not tall. He was never, ever going to look good at that body weight because he has the shape of a square, right? Classic bodybuilding. Even the giants now. Look at Dorian. Great V taper, what they used to call the classic X shape. He had great lines. Do you know Lumpy Princess from that?
Yeah, from Adventure Time.
He looks like Lumpy Princess. He is a blob. You go back to the early growth hormone days, there were some bodybuilders back then that looked the same because they were too big for their height. Or in Mike's case, he was too heavy for how short he is. I put it that way because I know he's insecure about his height. No, that's why he shoots all of his videos like this, because it makes him look taller.
With the big man chair.
Watch any of his videos, he shoots them from a low angle because it makes him look taller than he is. I maintain that if Mike were ever going to have a chance to be successful in bodybuilding, he would have to cut back to, if he came in at 195 pounds ripped, maybe, to try to be 240 at that height, no way. He looks like a blob. I mean, go back and look. Go look at Franco Columbu, who was like 5'5", 5'6". He competed at 185 pounds. Mike was trying to carry 60 pounds more than that. And so his already terrible shape was simply exacerbated by what I think is obvious bigorexia. He's got some severe body dysmorphia because he thinks bigger is better. Greg just did that entire video. No, Mike, bigger is not better. Yeah. Someone must like Mike Israetel.
Well, there's how Mike views his physique, and there's how the rest of the world views his physique. For instance, in his ad hominem-laden response to you on the failure to fail thing, he said, Lyle has bad genetics, implication, unlike me, I have good genetics. He says of Mike Mensa, I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Mensa. I know more things than Mike Mensa. I'm more educated than Mike Mensa.
Who am I compared to Mike Mensa? Well, I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Mensa. That's it. Yeah. So all of a sudden, that changes the game. Yeah. I'm more educated than Mike Mensa. I know more things than Mike Mensa. Yeah.
That's hilarious for its own reasons because I'm getting a little off topic, but that was a video he did with Johnny Shreve.
Oh, I
where
know.
Ostensibly they're criticizing Mike Mensa's training protocols, and yet Mike is saying that he's bigger and stronger than Mike Mensa. First of all, that's delusional, but are both
objectively false. He might be heavier than Mike Mensa, but bigger. Who cares? Bodybuilding, bigger is not better. That was he might be bigger, but is he better in strength? No, he's not stronger. I guarantee you that's not true. Mike lifts pansy ass weights and always has. He screams a lot while he's doing it. And then goes and throws up with conveniently placed cameras. That was always fascinating when he was going through that stage of throwing up for his followers. It's like, wow, the camera just happened to be set up there. How strange, how convenient to prove that he was tough and he trained hard. Okay.
It's just funny coming back to your thing of how he's at once the exercise scientist who says, don't listen to the biggest person in the gym.
Are the big guys good sources of info? Probably not. And they certainly don't know more than the science nerds in the industry.
But also, I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Mensa, hence I am more of an authority than he was.
Like I said, he'll make his decision on which argument to make based on the moment.
Yeah, but it's funny. I mean, in the moment, it didn't even work because, hello, he's Mike Mensa. He stood on the Mr. Olympia stage. He was Mr. Universe. What has Mike done in competitive bodybuilding? I mean, even if Mensa came back today, he'd have smoked Mike at that most recent show. Mike Israetel.
Yeah, but I mean, even look at, his whole thing with like, fuck Greg Doucette, and they had a big falling out, and they're not buddies anymore, and Greg, and like people have put photos of Greg and Mike next to him. Doucette has a pro card, and he's a judge, and yet somehow Mike is still better and more knowledgeable than him. Mike, he's accomplished something you never have. And both of the other guys from RP, Jared Feather and Charlie, they got their pro cards too.
That's right. Congratulations to them.
Yeah. Why? Well, among other things, they had better shape and genetics, but I bet they listened to their coaches in a way that Mike never did and never would. The suggestion that, Mike, maybe you would look better at 195, because he would. I mean, he wouldn't look any worse, but I think he could actually have decent lines. He could have a waist that wasn't so damn blocky.
He might also live to see 60.
Well, yeah, that's a whatever. Elite sport's not about health. I don't care about that. So, again, I know that's one of your thumping, but like elite sport's not about being healthy, so who gives a damn? But from the standpoint of actually being competitive, he's trying to hang with the mass monsters, and he doesn't have the height to do it. Period. He's simply too short with the biomechanics and the shape of an Oompa Loompa. But Oompa Loompas have actually better tans. Actually, if you look at than Mike did in a video. I pulled it out of the video I did, but I put a side by side of Mike and an Oompa Loompa because Mike was doing a double bicep and the Oompa Loompa kind of was too. So it was me being super obnoxious, but that's what I do.
That would have been good.
One thing with bodybuilding is that if you learn to pose well, you can at least accentuate good body parts. And, you know, that is part of the illusion. I don't know how far it really gets you with, you know, if you're doing call outs or whatever, but,
he mentioned in one podcast that he knew at his first bodybuilding show, you know, the one where he had gynecomastia, not a single ab, that he was seething on stage, that he was on the edge, you know, because they put the good guy in the center and they put the crap guys on the outside. And he was seething, and you could see it in his face, just angry, angry, angry. And he explained that even his wife told him, hey, you should cut that out. You look angry. So he's expressed that he doesn't have much of an interest in, as he puts it, the pageantry side of bodybuilding.
The other part of bodybuilding is what can be termed the pageantry. Posing, skincare, tanning, all that stuff. But for me personally, the pageantry, skincare, tanning, presentation, posing, it's especially the minute sort of tricks. Again, it's a wonderful thing. But for me personally, I couldn't give a flying fuck about it. Then I'm actively like, oh, that's right, this is a thing.
But that's all that it is.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
At a competitive level, that's all that it is, for right or for wrong. I mean, it is pageantry. It is basically a beauty contest of sorts. It is a dieting contest, more than anything. It is a who can starve themselves longest contest. I mean, what else would it be? I find that very baffling. But okay. You have to be honest with someone that you've come as far as you can go. Well, I don't see it happening. Mike needed someone to tell him that early on, but he never would have listened.
So where to from here for Mike? Do you reckon he should just retire?
Well, I think it's what he says he's going to do. He says he's stepping away from bodybuilding to focus on his content creation.
Because stepping away doesn't have a great degree of finality to it, though, does it?
It
sounds temporary.
I think he said he was retiring.
Yeah.
But you and I both know, and I think anyone that is familiar with this saga, such as it is, knows full well, this is not permanent. If Mike had any sense, if he's truly going to walk away from it, which you and I both know he's not. Because what has he said? You did a video on this too, when that hilarious neurotropics, where they talked about getting stoned the whole time.
Yeah.
Didn't they delete that one too?
They did. Yeah.
Funny that. Not funny, haha, but funny that. And he said he's like constant roid rage. I'm constantly like homicidal. I constantly want to kill. Like, oh yeah, that's worth it.
Like I'll read an Instagram comment and feel like, how dare you? Like I'll read a comment when I'm on Plenty of shit, and it's as usual a highly disrespectful comment on Instagram. And I fantasize about meeting that person in real life, walking up to them in the gym way too close to their face and be like, say something, you say it, and watch them cower and just relish as they cower. And then as they cower away, hurt them physically so that everyone can see, and then eat their organs. These are thoughts that I have like daily, sometimes multiple times a day, randomly.
But bodybuilding, you're doing all this to yourself for what? A plastic trophy? If that? For the accolades of a bunch of heads online? To put yourself through this, especially at that level, to say I'm constantly homicidal, all of the health issues that we now go through, all the people drop for what? Plastic trophy, and so a bunch of people on Instagram tell you you're great. Really?
Well,
so if Mike had any sense, he would downsize, drop all of the extra body weight to a normal human level, that he might actually be healthy and not full of rage all the time. But he won't. Even if he's ostensibly retired, at least until he decides in a few years he's going to try to come back. And we all know he will. He won't be able. The narcissist needs the accolades too much, and he won't get that doing content about how to talk to women, which was a recent video of his, by the way.
I've never met a single girl who I was convinced was actually attracted to intelligence. If girls liked intelligence, I'd be swimming in that shit from day one.
Okay. He needs guys to tell him how awesome he looks. He will come back. And he will do just as badly. Because when I'm truly being a dick, I will say, Mike couldn't win a show if he was the only one on stage. Even in Masters, where I think he thinks he might have a better chance, he's still going to be dealing with guys that were great when they were younger. Masters competitors can be just as good.
Oh yeah, they're good.
Better because they usually started younger and they're just older versions of their great younger selves. But he will not stay retired, and he certainly is not going to cut his, because if he gets smaller, who he sees in the mirror won't be what he wants to see because he thinks bigger is better. And he won't have everybody in his Instagram feed telling him, yeah, dude, you're huge and this and that and the other. So he's going to keep, in my opinion, he's going to keep doing exactly what he's doing. The same number of drugs, the same diet. And, we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens with the Deadpool going forwards. It seems like it's a weekly thing these days.
Of course, there's why Mike juices. There are the reasons he tells you for why he juices, and there's why he actually juices. The reasons he tells you are, well, I want to win an IFBB Pro card. The actual reasons, well, we can only speculate.
We can, however, the speculation will probably be more correct than not. This is something actually that came up in this documentary. You tend to see a very common background in a lot of people that get very deep into bodybuilding, natural or otherwise. But I think here, and this shows in the overall personality profile and how he deals with criticisms. You've got people that were bullied, scared, insecure, and thought, if I can get big and strong, I can protect myself against the scariness of the world. Do you know who Bob Paris is?
Yes.
Very famous bodybuilder, beautiful physique. And he's openly gay, but he was not then. And he was dealing with, they mentioned him in this documentary. And he talks about that when he came out in the 90s, he lost 85% of his sponsors and his income because it was still like that. But he was a gay man in a world where he could not be open. And he wrote this book called Gorilla Suit, which refers to, he got into bodybuilding to build himself a suit of muscular armor to protect himself against the world. And what I see when I run into these people like Mike, or Paul Carter's another good example, these big, strong, muscular guys, that 13-year-old insecurity is still there. They're hoping that they can make themselves big and strong and muscular, and that will make them scared. But deep down, they're still scared little children. Because how else can you explain their responses to the most legitimate of criticisms? Lashing out like fucking 5-year-olds. These are little boys in a adult's body. But the insecurity is still there. And I'm sure when Mike saw it as a way to get big and strong, yeah, that's why he does it. That's why I'm sure I'm not saying it just is what it is. There's some athletes do it so they can be the best at their sport, but bodybuilding is not a sport. It is such a unique activity in the sense that, again, when they talk about the history and the background of these people, it's kind of always the same thing. And it's sort of grew up in these little Midwestern towns and then they found bodybuilding. And it made me feel like someone, and being big and strong and muscular and powerful and all of this. And then steroids come in and make you feel like a fucking god from what this is why people don't come off anymore, right? You used to read about all the stuff with post-cycle therapy and guys, it wasn't, we can debate if anabolics are physically addictive, and I don't think they are in the sense that other recreational drugs are, but I think they can be very psychologically addicting.
Oh yeah. How could you ever go back to natural training after having experienced the highs of 600 milligrams of testosterone?
And when you between just either the physiological euphoria or the aggression, or the fact that your poundages have doubled and you gained 20 or 30 pounds overnight or whatever it is, right? You're always, because you go off and you crash. First off, you're 50% worse than you would be if you were natural. That was all the post-cycle therapy stuff. Now nobody goes off ever. Right. But yeah, because you usually see these guys standing next to other big dudes.
Yeah.
I'm on the airplane. Ronnie is in 2 first-class seats, still spilling out, still looking cramped. It is inhuman. So yeah, to go from that to even semi-normal it just can't be done.
Mm.
I mean, it certainly takes a different mindset. And I think in bodybuilding, especially when your whole identity is tied up with being big, it's that much worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the sport, though. Like some people, they never quite quit. I think between Mike's identity being tied up in being big, also, for right or for wrong, part of his social media presence, part of his authority comes from his physique. And yeah, that's me being an asshole.
In as much as he has one.
Yeah. He would lose, for the same reason that he would lose followers if he ever admitted he was wrong. That's why gurus can't do it, right? Because if they admit that they're wrong, they might be seen as infallible, and that can't be.
You mean fallible?
Yeah, that. They must be seen as infallible to the true believer.
Yeah.
So they cannot admit they are wrong ever. Unless it's for just the most utterly superficial stuff. They'll just change what they're saying and hope nobody notices and block anyone who points it out. Whereas, there's also the little boy component. Something else, when you're a boy, you think that admitting you're wrong is a sign of weakness. And when you actually grow up and turn into an adult, you realize that admitting you're wrong is a strength.
Yeah.
It takes way more balls to admit you're wrong than to double down. But yeah, so but it's the instant. So yeah, so anyway, so Mike's identity and his authority is tied up in his physique. The idea of him becoming smaller and downsizing, even if it would make him healthier, he won't do it.
It's kind of a prison of his own making, because you can blow up on YouTube fitness without being a big roided behemoth. For instance, you've got Athlean X, who's got in the order of 10 million subscribers. You've got Jeff Nippard, whose subscriber count's just soaring. He's got like 5.6 million. Mike Israetel, though, I mean, you would think that maybe his size has helped him because, in this superficial era of brain rot and optics, you have to look the part. But honestly, I think had he never touched, any dose above 250 milligrams, he would have looked the part to the extent that he could have been credible.
Right. You don't have to be big. You don't have to be as big as he was to get that following. But once you have been identified as being that big as part of your appeal to authority, there's no going back again.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to make. Yeah.
That's not entirely true. I guarantee you there's people who will still go, yeah, Dorian knows his stuff. But that's because Dorian had the success that went along with it. Right?
Yeah.
Dorian was an 8 times Mr. Olympia winner. That is where his authority came from, was from his actual success.
Yeah.
Mike didn't have even that.
No.
And Mike said to Omar Isuf, I asked you this an hour ago, and I'm still mispronouncing it.
Isuf.
Thank you. And I guess Mike said, I want to prove my methods work by getting my pro card.
So what is it? Like, I get everything you said, man.
The only reason I compete is to illustrate to people that marginally more than they would otherwise believe the methods that we espouse at Renaissance Periodization are effective.
So transparent. I like it. So you think...
Well, by his own argument, Mike, your methods don't work. Period. because you never got your pro card. You never even placed worth a shit on stage. I mean, it wasn't like he got second. He barely missed. Wasn't his best placing like 3rd out of 4 at some Masters competition a couple of years ago? Something like that.
In 2020, I believe, was his best
Yeah,
placing.
something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, so by Mike's own logic, since he never won a pro card, ergo, his methods don't work.
And they don't.
Meanwhile, despite his, well, we listen to people based on who they've coached. Well, I coached an elite female powerlifter who had some ungodly number of records, state, national, and world, across 2 age groups and 2 weight classes. And I helped a guy in my Facebook group, you mentioned this, a guy named Larry. Didn't coach him, I'm not going to claim I did, but I helped him dial in his final stuff coming into his last contest. He was using my ultimate diet too, figuring out the timing on carbing up and water and drying out and stuff like that. And hey, Mike, he won his natural pro card his first show out. You can bitch about whether Greg or I never would have coached you and you couldn't have afforded me if you'd even wanted me, but I can't guarantee you would have won, but you wouldn't have looked as bad as you did. Because I know how to get people into shape, and you don't even know how to get yourself into shape. So if you're watching this, buddy, you too.
Great.
Again, people that will follow my information and my advice that I will not claim to have coached, except in as much as they did what was in my books and stuff. And they all look better than Mike ever has. I mean, like I said, Sumi, she did a photo shoot. She was leaner and drier and darker than Mike had ever been on stage. So, yeah, my methods work, Mike, and you proved by your own logic that yours don't. So
it's the most epic self-own.
I mean, yeah, you can only get away with it. Like you need to save that type of thing for after the fact, right? You can only
He's
call
praying people forget that line.
Well, yeah, but you can only call your shot. It only works if you actually won. Right? You can't talk that much smack unless you win. You wait till after you get your pro card and go, see, that proves my method works. You don't use that as the predictor, because that will come back to bite you in the ass. I guess that is, fundamentally the difference between confidence and cockiness. Confidence is based on what you have accomplished. Cockiness is based on what you think you're going to accomplish. And as the old saying, don't count the chickens and that sort of thing. It's true.
It's great advice.
I mean, God, it kills me. It kills me to watch these events online and you'll see these races and someone starts celebrating too early.
And
gets beat at the line. No, you wait. There's time for celebration afterwards. You do not celebrate until after it's over.
That is in a way what Mike was doing.
Yeah, he was basically pre-celebrating what he thought he was going to accomplish. Now you got to wait till afterwards, because otherwise that will absolutely come back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
So
sure.
as much as I know anything about, I suspect that he, to your point, was just using lots and lots and lots more drugs to make up for what was clearly inadequate training and nutrition. Because he can say it worked for him, and I mean, yeah, it worked for you. If by work you mean abject failure at the only sport you ever tried to be good at. I mean, I at least had the sense, like I did. I did powerlifting and I enjoyed it. I was never going to be more than mediocre at it. So I moved back to something I could be good at, which was inline. Go with your strengths. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Mike, your diet and training expertise sure worked. I mean, I don't know. I know people have been like, well, Jared Feather got result. Does Jared train with Mike anymore? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't really follow it. I know Charlie's not part of that crew anymore. I know he was working with someone else when he got his pro card, which again, congratulations to him. But yeah, so Mike, you definitely proved all you set out to in bodybuilding, I guess. I'm told that's what his apologists are saying now. Well, it's okay for Mike to retire. he proved everything he had to in bodybuilding. And what was that exactly? What exactly did he prove with all of this, other than you can lose all your hair, get gyno, take who knows how many years off your life, have constant anger issues, and still be an abject failure? That's what he proved.
Sponsored
But
by
now
RP.
Sponsored by Renaissance Periodization. Buy their app. Train you too can train like Mike.
Brought to you by RP. Great.
This industry, man. I mean, it's always been like this. It's always going to be like this. Nothing is going to change ever. It's the nature of the beast. And it's just the reality. And as much as you and I enjoy doing this, the reality is it's not going to change a damn thing.
As much as I love to gloat about how Mike's own methods don't work by his very own logic, I think we can say a little bit more about Mike's failure in competitive bodybuilding. Mike's failure in competitive bodybuilding is instructive, showing us what not to do. He shows us what happens when you don't learn from past mistakes. He shows us what happens when you try to play the mass game when you don't have the genetics for it. He shows us what it looks like when drugs are used to cover up flaws in training and nutrition. He shows us what happens when you're hubristic. In all events, it doesn't end well. In this video, we put Mike under the same scrutiny he applies to others in the fitness industry. In Chapter 2, we showed that Mike's fitness advice is terrible. In Chapter 3, we showed that Mike can't handle criticism of his bad advice. In Chapter 4, we provided a diagnosis of Mike's failures in competitive bodybuilding. We've talked a lot about Mike, but I want to expand this discussion briefly into something about more than just Mike. Occasionally, I get a comment from someone who asks what my problem is with Mike. Is it that I have some kind of personal vendetta? The answer is no. I focus on Mike for a particular reason. I focus on Mike because he's not just a person. He's a paradigm, a phenomenon. Mike is a personification of the most degenerate aspects of the fitness industry. Like many who have come before, and many who will come after, Mike is a perpetrator in the fitness industry. His bad information has misled countless natural trainees. He backpedals on his old nonsense with new nonsense. He can't take criticism. He inadvertently glorifies drug abuse with his fame, money, and influence. But Mike isn't just a perpetrator. He's also a victim. The fitness industry led Mike to take bodybuilding way, way further than he should have. The fitness industry led Mike to take the dangerous cocktail of drugs that compromises his physical and mental health. In that sense, Mike is also a victim of the very cycle he perpetuates. I hope that we can break that cycle. I also hope that Mike changes his destructive course of action. Because as I've stated elsewhere, the counterfactual Mike, who stayed natural, would be happier, healthier, and a better role model. My concluding remarks are these. One day there'll be another Mike. A superficial man, or woman, who cultivates enormous influence with smooth talking and a given set of credentials. Please cast a critical eye on him or her. That means, don't be sucked in by the confident or self-assured presentation. Don't be sucked in by his or her credentials and authoritative delivery. Look at the facts supporting the individual claims. If there is none, then dismiss the claims outright. In the end, I hope this video helps you negotiate with the bullshit that pervades the fitness industry and everyday life.
I think most people who they triple down even more, and they'll just be like, yeah, they're never going to admit that they backed the wrong horse.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, I can understand why people back him in the first place. This is okay. It's because people, hear me out. When I say people, I don't mean people who are deeply immersed in, the evidence-based bodybuilding world, people like you, for instance. I mean general population. They don't have all the time to do deep investigations into all the literature and correct training and eating practices. So they look at Mike and they see this big guy who's articulate, who has a degree, and they use that as a heuristic. They're like, oh, I think I can probably trust him. So then they just take what he says at face value.
Yes.
And it's sad because people rely on heuristics. I don't blame them. How could they not? But that's why it's important to call him out.
Well, and that's
because heuristics alone fail us.
Correct. And the fitness industry is unique among industries, and that it allows so much of this to happen. I've written a bunch of ranty stuff in my Facebook group. I don't think you can find other industries that are like this, because, as an example, you can't find, like, if you are a car repairman or you are an aerospace engineer, there are not a million things that appear to work, and you cannot use a drug that will make the training and nutrition not matter, right? The car either works or it doesn't. The plane either flies or it doesn't. We don't get to argue about physics, right? Or wing design beyond a certain point, right? Aerodynamic, but in bodybuilding, in fitness, in nutrition, A, a million things seem to work, but B, when you have drugs covering up all the endless mistakes and making the training and nutrition literally not matter beyond a certain point, right? And you'll go, oh, that's just an excuse. No, it's not. When 600 milligrams of testosterone will make you gain 10 kilos of lean body mass in 20 weeks, the majority of which is muscle, with the most, I forget, did Basin have them train at all? In one of the studies, he didn't. In one of the studies, it was very basic stuff. Doesn't matter. That is a year's worth of training for a beginner, if they're lucky, in 20 weeks. And they go, 600 milligrams is a baby dose, maybe a daily dose, right? And everybody thought I was kidding about that. And then a few years later, Dallas McCarver passed away, and it was estimated that he was taking 15 grams a week of anabolics. Now I know others have said, well, it was a blood draw problem. It doesn't matter. I've seen pros, you can find them on Instagram, that put up their weekly doses. It is 3 to 5 grams a week of various injectables, orals, and that doesn't even count the insulin, the GH, the untested peptides. 600 milligrams a week will make you grow better than the most perfect training in the world. These guys are taking 5 to 10 times that. I mean, I shudder to guess what the doses are at the highest level, the 320-pound monsters that are out there right now, right? The drugs make it not matter, and this is the only field where that can happen. So basically, people, the heuristic people are applying their expertise. I mean, supposedly the fit, well, I have a PhD. Yeah, I've seen what university you got it from. Don't be too impressed. But that is the appeal to authority. And I'm like, look, there's plenty of PhDs and MDs that are complete morons and et cetera. And then if it's not that, it's their physique. And don't get me wrong. Yes, that could be part of it. But when you throw drugs into the mix, drug-based training, and people that are honest about it will point out that, yeah, the training that works or is best when you're on juice is completely different than what a natural should be doing. I did a big-ass podcast with Broderick Chavez about that a while ago. Like I said, and I even admitted, as far as the way Mike was training, I said this repeatedly. I go, yeah, look, not only do I not care how you train, but there is logic to not pushing to limits all the time because you get hurt, right? When the drugs are making you that much stronger. Although if you look at most of the best guys and look at their training sets, they go until the bar speed slows. Go watch some of those guys doing heavy hacks. They are not stopping 8 reps out. They are not setting a speed cap. They are not, or go watch Dorian. I'm not saying to train like Dorian, but the point of this being that drugs make anything work. And the studies show that incontrovertibly. Don't people recognize you in the gym? No. Like in 30 years, 2 people have ever recognized me. Ever. Which is fine with me because it means I can actually get my workout done without being bothered. And even in those couple of cases, every once in a while somebody would come up and be like, "Are you Lyle McDonald?" And here's what I do. And I'll be like, "You Lyle McDonald?" Well, that depends. Because that could be a, "Hey, I love your stuff online and want to talk to you," or that could be, "Hey, I want to kick the shit out of you." So I always move out of arm's length.
No, I don't think most people, unless it's Mike Israetel, who's been
a lot of people
vocal
talk
about his violent ideations.
Oh, I've been threatened many times by people online, which I find to be hilarious.
Oh, Mike said that he wanted to strangle you.
Debating Lyle McDonald, like if he was in front of me, it would take the world for me to not choke him to death.
I'm easy to find, Mike. I live down in Austin. He was here. Apparently, he was here a while back. I'm easy to find. It's easy to be a shit talker online. I mean, talk about a lame ass threat. Mike's like, "Yeah, I'm tough." Like, okay, and you're threatening me online to strangle me?
I do want to correct you on a small thing.
Okay, please.
Now, you did a podcast with a fellow Aussie named Daniel Peckick recently. It was a great podcast, and you brought me up in it.
I've got a buddy. You just Solomon Nelson?
Don't know him.
Probably not. Oh no! What did I get wrong?
Well, you told Daniel that I'm in my 30s.
You know, he's in his 30s.
I'm actually 25.
Okay.
But I'm flattered that I make a mature impression.
I'm sure I was just, on that one, I was guessing out of my butt. I didn't do my research. And then it doesn't. Okay. I think it's just you certainly seem more mature than the typical 25-year-old. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Well, that's just because you're, I don't know, for good or for bad. And many people would see this as bad. And part of the reason we get along is I see elements of myself at your age in you, by which I mean a compulsive obsessiveness to facts and like it is. I know I made a joke about that the first time we talked I made a speed running joke and you were like, "Oh, by the way, I'm a speed runner." I'm like, I believe you completely when you say that. Because I basically was like, look, all these speedrunners are totally on spectrum. I didn't say it exactly that way, but I'm saying it that way because I live in America and people lose their mind over words. And then you were like, "Oh yeah, I speedrun Halo rocket jumping." And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't surprise
Team Fortress 2. Yeah.
Yes. You have a certain, and that was me, right? I am of the opinion, in as much as, BuzzFeed quizzes are the answer to everything, that if the diagnosis had existed when I was younger, they absolutely would have put me on the spectrum. And I see elements of that. So I think I just assumed you were older. And unfortunately, it makes for, it's not necessarily the happy. I mean, you'll be good at lawyering, because that is the thing where you have to just know every detail known to God and man and have it all, on par.
I appreciate that you have some confidence in me.
Well, I mean, it's just like I said, I see it in your videos. Like I can see just like, you trust me, you're at the point, you put way more energy into yours than I do into mine, but I'm just too lazy to edit. I'm too lazy to go find all that video clip stuff anymore. That's just because I'm old. But when I was younger, I was like that, right? When I still had the youthful.
I think you put a considerable amount of effort into your videos, like timing the reps and everything.
Oh, that was a whole separate thing. That was me. When I get those brief moments of spite, I can do it for a little while. But compared to my 20s and 30s, like my obsessiveness, like I don't have the fire the way I used to. And I still love this field. I still keep up with it. I still read everything. It still fascinates me from a physiological sense. But the industry is exhausting. And after 30 years, I've tried to fight the good fight my entire career. I've tried to fight against waves of relentless, increasing amounts of stupidity and bad information. And I stand by it. I've written books and written articles, and I think the mistake I made when I was younger, and the mistake we're making now, the reality is that the grand majority of people are not going to listen. The people that have attached themselves to Mike, no amount of evidence matters. It's like politics. And we talked about that briefly before you started recording. You can show factual evidence of something to someone about their political party or and it won't change a thing. The cognitive dissonance is too much. I've gotten to the point, like, you can only help who you can help. And I no longer have the energy to try to change people's minds until they're ready to listen. You are still young. Oh, just wait. Just wait till you get into law. Just wait. Well, I don't know. Law. Well, I don't know what. School. I don't know what specifically you're going to go into. But, there is a idealism of youth. There is, you think you can change the world, and you can't. But you don't realize that till you're older. All you can do, you can do the best you can do, and you can help who you can help. So that's me. You do the best you can.
Hopefully this video that I've just made with you plays a small but significant role, hopefully more than a small role, in combating misinformation.
I hope so. There is, and again, I know I'm overgeneralizing. There are people that absolutely will see that, and you can make that argument, right? There are people that will see it and they will double down. When you show them, factually that they're wrong, they will double down. There are people that already agree with you, and there probably is a proportion of people that will see this and maybe start thinking about it critically and may change their mind, or maybe in a while.